The ship identity paradox. Imagine an ancient ship, its wooden hull groaning under the weight of time and salt. For generations, sailors have crossed oceans upon it. Men who lived, laughed, fought, and died on its deck. Storms have battered its masts. Waves have slammed against its sides. And piece by piece, plank by plank, those weathered parts have been replaced. First a splintered beam here, a rotting floorboard there. Then the sails, torn by wind, are replaced with fresh canvas. The mast is swapped for a new one. The rudder, eaten away by years of seawater, is built anew. Until, after many years, not a single fragment of the original wood remains. And then comes the question that has haunted philosophers for more than 2,000 years. Is this still the same ship that first set sail, or is it an entirely different vessel that only wears the name of the original like a mask? This puzzle is known as the ship of Theseus paradox. Its earliest telling comes from the Greek historian Plutarch, who wrote of the mythical hero Theseus, the slayer of the Minotaur, whose ship was preserved by the Athenians for centuries. As the wood decayed, the people replaced each piece with a new one, until none of the original material remained. The paradox emerges from the mind's deep conflict between continuity and change. We want to believe that an unbroken chain of history binds an object to its identity, even if every molecule of it has been swapped. But we also feel an equally strong pull toward the idea that physical material defines what something is. And if all that matter is gone, perhaps so is the thing itself. Some have tried to escape the question by saying that identity is defined by function. The ship sails as it always did, performs as it always did, and so it remains the same. But others point out a disturbing twist. What if someone collected all the discarded, rotting planks of the original ship, restored them, and reassembled them into a vessel, which, then, is the real ship of Theseus, the one that has sailed continuously for centuries, but is made of entirely new parts, or the one rebuilt from the ancient wood? Both can claim legitimacy. Both carry a history. And yet, both cannot be the same ship, or can they? The paradox doesn't just apply to ships. It extends to every part of life and existence. Consider the human body. Nearly every cell in your body today will be replaced within a decade. Your skin renews every month. Your skeleton regenerates itself over roughly a decade. Even the atoms that make up your cells are constantly replaced. The person you were as a child shares no physical matter with the person you are now. Yet you still feel like you. You still remember your first heartbreak, your earliest fear, the smell of your childhood home. If all the matter has changed, what connects you to that child? Is it the continuity of consciousness, the unbroken flow of memory and experience? Or is it an illusion your brain creates to make sense of constant transformation? Some philosophers argue that identity is not rooted in physical substance at all, but in the pattern, the arrangement of parts, and the relationships between them. Under this view, the ship of Theseus remains the same because the pattern of its structure and purpose has been preserved. Likewise, you are you because the intricate pattern of your brain, its neural connections, memories, and habits, maintains a recognizable shape over time. The atoms are irrelevant. What matters is the form they take. But there's an unsettling implication here. If identity is just a pattern, then what happens if we copy that pattern perfectly into another medium? Imagine building an exact duplicate of the ship of Theseus, not just in shape, but with identical wear marks, identical stains, every detail replicated. If it's the pattern that matters, then both the original and the replica are equally the ship. But that means identity isn't unique. It can be duplicated. And if it can be duplicated, it can also be destroyed without losing it, so long as a copy survives. This pushes us into strange territory about whether individuality is real or just a fragile narrative we tell ourselves. The paradox also forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about memory and personal change. Think about a friendship you've had for years. You and your friend are both different people now than when you met, different tastes, different beliefs, different bodies. Yet you still say you're the same friends. The friendship, like the ship, has been rebuilt piece by piece through countless moments and experiences. But does it survive because of a continuous thread of interaction, or because you choose to believe in its continuity? And what about objects we attach value to? A family heirloom ring that has had its stones replaced, its band reshaped. When does it stop being the same ring your ancestor wore? Museums face this dilemma when restoring ancient artifacts. At what point does preservation become replacement, and the artifact become a replica? The Ship of Theseus reminds us that authenticity is not a clear-cut property. It is a human decision, shaped by emotion, history, and need. The most haunting aspect of the paradox is that it doesn't just ask, what is the ship? It asks, what are we? Every breath we take, every experience we have, every year that passes replaces part of us with something new. And yet, we cling to the idea that there is a core self untouched by time. Some say that core is the soul, something immaterial and eternal. Others see it as a psychological construct, a story we weave to tie our shifting selves together. If the soul exists, perhaps the Ship of Theseus is easy to solve. The ship's soul remains even if every part changes. But if the soul is just memory and pattern, then identity becomes fragile, always one step away from dissolving. The Ship of Theseus doesn't give us an answer. It was never meant to. It forces us into the uneasy space between our need for permanence and the reality of change. It whispers that maybe nothing truly stays the same, not ships, not people, not the bonds between us. And yet, maybe that's the beauty of it, that continuity isn't a property of the material world, but of the meaning we give to it. So the next time you step onto a ship or hold an object from your past, or look into a mirror at the person you become, ask yourself, if every part of this has changed, what makes it still itself? Is it history? Is it memory? Or is it simply the story you've chosen to believe? And if you strip away the story, will anything be left at all? The time traveler's birth loop. Let me take you deep into a thought so unsettling, so impossible, that it eats away at the very roots of identity, time, and existence itself. Imagine you are a traveler, not of seas, not of continents, but of centuries. You have mastered the art of moving through time. The past and future are doors you can open at will. One day, you decide to step backward, far beyond your own childhood, beyond the day your parents met, beyond even the birth of your grandparents. You arrive in an era where your family line hasn't yet begun, and in a strange twist of fate, you find yourself drawn to someone whose life intersects with yours in a way you could never anticipate. That person is destined to become the parent of one of your parents, and you become their partner. In other words, you're the reason your parent exists. You're their parent's parent. You're your own grandparent. At first, the mind refuses to process it. This is not the romanticized time travel love story of movies. This is biology, lineage, blood. If you are your own ancestor, the question arises, where did it all begin? Who lit the first spark in the chain of life if you are both the cause and the result? This is called a causal loop. More specifically, the bootstrap paradox applied to biology. Normally, when you trace a family tree, it spreads outward and backward into the mists of history. But here, the tree bends back on itself, like a snake swallowing its own tail. The root is the branch. The beginning is also the end. To truly grasp it, let's break it down. Picture a man named Daniel, born in the year 2080. He grows up, learns the secret of time travel, and decides to explore the early 20th century. There, he meets a young woman in 1920. She has never heard of him, of course. He is a stranger from the future. But through a series of events, they become close. Eventually, they have a child. That child grows up to be Daniel's own grandparent. And decades later, Daniel is born from that bloodline. From the outside, it appears seamless. History records a grandparent, a parent, and then Daniel. But under the surface, the origin of this line is impossible to locate. Without Daniel, the grandparent would not have been born. Without the grandparent, Daniel would not have been born. There is no first cause. It is a loop without entry or exit. Think about the genetic implications. Every cell in your body carries DNA passed down through generations. If you're your own ancestor, you are passing your own genetic material backward through time. The very traits that define you, your eye color, your voice, the curve of your smile, are not just inherited. They are recycled. You are both the sender and receiver of the same genetic message, folded endlessly into itself. Now the real terror of the paradox emerges. If this loop exists, you never truly began. There was no first spark, no ancestral Adam or Eve in your line. You exist because you already existed. The universe, in allowing this, has trapped you in a closed circuit of birth and death, making you both the origin and the product of yourself. But let's go deeper into the philosophical consequences. Identity normally grows from a chain of cause and effect. Your parents shaped you, their parents shaped them, and so on. But in the birth loop, the shaper and the shaped are the same entity. Did you decide your own fate before you were born? Did the version of you in the past choose to create you in the future, knowing that the future you would one day travel back to become the past you's ancestor? The horror here is not just biological. It's existential. The loop eliminates free will. You cannot choose not to go back and fulfill the role, because if you didn't, you wouldn't exist in the first place. Every choice you make is already woven into the loop's fabric. The past is fixed because you are the past. The future is fixed because you are the future. And yet, from a cold, logical standpoint, the loop is perfectly consistent. Time itself doesn't care where the first cause comes from, as long as the sequence is internally stable. The laws of physics, at least as we know them, don't explicitly forbid such loops if time travel is possible. The only thing they defy is our sense of reason. Some theorists compare this to the bootstrap paradox in objects, where, for example, you receive a time machine manual from your future self, and then later, you travel back and give that same manual to your younger self. The information has no origin. It was never written by anyone. But when you replace the object with a human being, the stakes change. You're no longer talking about misplaced causality. You're talking about misplaced existence. Science fiction has toyed with this many times. Robert Heinlein's short story, All You Zombies, is perhaps the most extreme. A character becomes their own mother and father through a tangled web of time jumps. But the idea isn't just fiction's playground. Theoretical physics leaves a small, shadowy space where closed time-like curves could exist, bending space-time so that paths loop back onto themselves. If one of those loops were biological, it could birth and rebirth the same person forever. But here's the nightmare no one talks about. What happens if something disrupts the loop? If a single variable changes, an illness, an accident, a choice, and you fail to become your own ancestor, then the chain collapses. You were never born to go back in time. The moment the loop breaks, you vanish from existence entirely, retroactively erased from every moment you ever touched. The world you knew would adjust instantly, as though you had never been there. And yet, if you vanish, you never broke the loop. If you never broke it, you still exist. If you still exist, you can still break it. The paradox devours itself like a predator with no prey but its own body. In the end, the time traveler's birth loop is not just a strange hypothetical. It's a mirror reflecting the fragility of what we call origin. If time can fold so perfectly that a person can give birth to themselves, then beginnings are illusions. The universe may not care where a story starts, because in its deepest machinery, there may be no such thing as a start. Only circles spinning forever, carrying us through the same roles over and over, until the question of who came first becomes meaningless. And perhaps, somewhere right now, someone is stepping into a machine that will take them back, not to meet their ancestors, but to become them. The mask that lies truthfully. Imagine a man standing before you wearing a mask. His eyes are visible, sharp, and unblinking, and his voice carries no hesitation when he says, "I am lying." The sentence should be simple. The meaning should be clear. But the moment those words escape his lips, your mind begins to twist in on itself. If he's lying, then what he says is false. But if the statement, "I am lying," is false, then he is actually telling the truth, which means he's lying again. It's a loop without an exit, a thought trap that refuses to let go. And yet, within that loop, there's a strange glimmer, as though the paradox itself is pointing toward a deeper, hidden truth about reality. This isn't just wordplay. It's not a puzzle you solve and move on from. This is the liar paradox, one of the oldest and most unsettling riddles in human thought. The Greeks wrestled with it. Philosophers in medieval monasteries struggled to write about it without falling into madness. Logicians have tried to tame it with mathematics, and yet it remains slippery, smirking like a mask that shows two faces at once. At first, it seems harmless, just a clever sentence. But think about what it's doing. Language is supposed to be our bridge to truth. Words are meant to connect the thought in one mind to the understanding in another. The moment a paradox like this appears, the bridge fractures. The words still exist, but they no longer lead anywhere certain. They circle back, feeding into themselves like a serpent swallowing its tail. Consider a real-world example. A man who is known to be a compulsive liar walks into a courtroom and declares, "Everything I say in this trial will be a lie." If we take him at his word, then this very statement must be a lie, which means at least some of what he says will be true. But if part of it is true, then not everything is a lie. And if not everything is a lie, the statement, "Everything I say will be a lie," is itself untrue, which could mean it's true that some of it is truthful, and so the spiral begins. The court cannot determine truth from falsehood by his words alone. His mask has fused with his face. This is more than a linguistic trick. It exposes something unsettling about how we handle truth in the real world. We like to think truth and lies are clean opposites, that you can place a statement into one box or the other and close the lid. But this paradox shows us that there are cases where the boxes collapse into each other, where a lie contains the seed of a truth and truth hides inside the skin of a lie. The most dangerous part is not when someone tells you a lie. It's when the lie tells you it's lying, because that forces you to make a choice. Do you believe it, which means believing the lie? Or do you reject it, which means it might have told the truth? It's the perfect form of manipulation, because either way, the speaker controls the frame of your thinking. You are now playing their game, and the rules are impossible to win. This isn't just philosophical. Politicians, spies, con artists, and propagandists have used versions of this technique for centuries. They admit a fault in such a way that the admission itself becomes suspect, turning the confession into a new form of deception. "I'm not going to lie to you" is a phrase that often precedes the most carefully constructed manipulations. By preemptively questioning their own truthfulness, they inoculate themselves against being caught. If you catch them lying, they can say, "I told you I might be lying." If you believe them, they've already succeeded. Now, think about this in the realm of relationships. A partner says, "I'm lying to you." If you believe them, trust is shattered, but if you don't believe them, then you assume they're telling the truth, which means they are lying, which means the trust is still shattered. It's a move that forces you into permanent uncertainty, where every possibility undermines the ground beneath you. Some philosophers argue that the liar paradox is evidence that language itself is flawed, that it contains cracks through which certainty can slip away. If truth can't be perfectly defined in every case, maybe reality itself has edges we can't touch. Others argue that the paradox reveals something about self-reference, the danger of statements that loop back to talk about themselves. It's like pointing a camera at its own monitor. The image repeats into infinity, each layer distorting the one before it. But there's a darker interpretation. Maybe the paradox isn't a flaw at all. Maybe it's a mirror of how reality actually works. Maybe truth and lies are not cleanly separated, but woven together, each borrowing strength from the other. After all, the most effective lies often carry a piece of truth inside them, and truths can be so twisted by context that they become indistinguishable from lies. The liar who says he's lying might be telling the truth and lying at the same time, not alternately, but simultaneously, like light being both a particle and a wave. If this is possible in language, could it be possible in reality? Imagine intelligence agencies planting disinformation. They release a story that's mostly false but anchored by one verifiable detail. People who fact-check it find that the detail is true, and so they conclude the whole story must be true. The falsehood rides inside the truth like a smuggler's cargo. Now reverse it, a mostly true story seeded with one false claim. The discovery of that single lie causes people to reject the whole truth it carried. In both cases, truth and lies are fused into something inseparable, a mask that both reveals and hides at the same time. This is why the liar who admits lying is so dangerous. They're not just confusing you, they're corrupting the very tools you use to find clarity. Every sentence becomes a Mobius strip. You start on the side marked truth, walk along it, and without ever stepping over an edge, you find yourself on lie and then back again. In the end, the paradox doesn't give you an answer. That's the point. It's not meant to be solved. It's meant to show you that some questions collapse the act of questioning itself. The liar's mask is not hiding a single face. It's hiding the fact that there might be no single face to begin with. The truth and the lie might be the same entity, shifting depending on how you try to hold them. So, if a liar tells you he's lying, maybe the right response isn't to solve the puzzle. Maybe it's to step back and realize you've been invited into a game where the rules are not broken. The rules are the trap. And in that moment, you understand the hidden truth. Sometimes the mask is not meant to be removed. Sometimes it's the only thing that exists. The unopenable door. There are some doors that exist not to be used, not to be crossed, not to be opened, but to remain closed forever. Their presence is not about passage. It is about prohibition. The unopenable door is not simply wood and hinges or steel and lock. It is an idea, a boundary made solid, a point in space where human curiosity collides with something it cannot, must not, touch. The most unnerving thing about such a door is that it demands your attention by doing nothing at all. It just stands there, silent, waiting. It could be in an ancient monastery at the end of a hallway where even the monks don't tread, its surface darkened with centuries of oil from hands that tried and failed. Or it could be in a crumbling Victorian house, hidden behind wallpaper, discovered only when the plaster gives way to reveal a frame that should not be there. Even in modern cities, sometimes you find them steel-plated, sealed from the inside, with no sign of hinges, no handle, just the shape of a door that says, without speaking, "Not you. Not ever." What is behind it? That is where the mind begins its slow descent into madness. Some say danger is sealed within. Something toxic, something ancient, something so potent that if it were to leak into our reality, it would undo the fragile threads of existence. Others suspect the real danger is not what's behind the door at all, but what opening it would do to you. The knowledge, the sight, the truth you would encounter. It might not kill you, but it would change you in ways no one could reverse. You might survive the opening, but you would not survive being yourself afterward. The human brain is not kind to uncertainty. We are wired to resolve mystery, to push boundaries. That's why forbidden doors are so psychologically dangerous. The moment you know a thing exists, but are told you must never touch it, your mind turns it into an obsession. This is the same compulsion that made sailors look toward uncharted waters even when their maps warned of sea monsters. It is the same impulse that drove scientists to split the atom even after realizing it could lead to unspeakable destruction. The unopenable door is the physical manifestation of temptation. Think about the old myth of Pandora. She was given a box, sealed, mysterious, and told never to open it. The instruction itself became the spark. If the box had been given without comment, maybe it would have sat quietly forever. But being told no transformed it from a container into a test of will. And like every human before and after her, she gave in. Out came chaos, suffering, death. The door is the same. It does not need to move to ruin you. It ruins you by existing. Consider an example from history. The so-called locked room in the Great Pyramid of Giza that remained untouched for thousands of years. Archaeologists eventually reached it. Inside, a chamber filled with nothing, empty air, and yet people reported feeling an intense, almost physical unease when they crossed its threshold. The space had been perfectly sealed since it was built. Perhaps it was never meant to contain an object, but to preserve a moment, a space untouched by time. To enter was to shatter something delicate, invisible but real. Or think of the door in the catacombs of Paris, deep underground, marked with a warning carved into the stone. Do not enter. Death lies beyond. Those who disobeyed found not treasure or horror, but disorientation so profound that they became lost in the labyrinth and were never seen again. Was it a curse? No, it was a simple fact. The human mind, deprived of landmarks and sound, begins to collapse in on itself. The danger was not a beast, but the collapse of perception itself. There's a philosophical dimension here, too. If the door exists only because it must never be opened, then opening it destroys the reason for its existence. It becomes meaningless the moment you act against it. The forbidden is only forbidden so long as it remains untouched. Once touched, it is no longer mystery. It is just an object. And yet, the act of touching it changes you. This is the paradox. The door's power lies entirely in your restraint, but your restraint is constantly under attack by your own mind. In some ways, the unopenable door is like the nuclear launch key in a glass case. The act of breaking the glass is irreversible. It is not the door you fear. It is the fact that once it swings open, you cannot return to the world as it was before. Knowledge is like that. Certain truths are terminal. They cannot be unlearned. Imagine you finally give in. Your hand is on the handle. The metal is cold, almost wet, as though it has been waiting for you. The latch gives without resistance. Light or darkness rushes out. What you see is not a monster. It is not gold. It is not even anything you can name. It is something that makes everything else, your past, your identity, your beliefs, feel like paper held up to a fire. In a single second, you understand something you were never meant to know, and the shape of your thoughts will never be human again. And yet, you could have walked away. That is the cruelest part. The danger was not behind the door. The danger was in the knowing. The door was the question you could not live without answering. You opened it because you had to, because the space between your curiosity and your fear was too small to stand in any longer. And now, the door stands behind you, still closed from the outside, but forever open in your mind. That is why such doors are built, not to protect us from what lies beyond, but to measure who we are, to see how far we can live with a truth we do not touch. Some of us will turn away and survive. Some of us will open it and be undone. And maybe, just maybe, the reason it is there at all is to make sure that no one person's will is strong enough to resist forever. Because sooner or later, someone always opens the door. And when they do, the danger is no longer behind it. It's already out. The puzzle with missing piece. Imagine sitting at a table, the pieces of a grand puzzle spread before you. Each one fits perfectly, interlocking into a larger picture that promises completion. Hours pass, your hands moving instinctively. Corner pieces first, edges next, the great middle filling in like a painting slowly revealing itself. You begin to see the whole, a scene of impossible beauty, something worth framing, worth preserving. But then, when the final spaces are closing, you realize something strange. There's a piece missing, not misplaced, not lost beneath the table or in the folds of a sleeve. It was never meant to exist. The puzzle's very design, its blueprint from the moment of creation, included this absence. The space is permanent. It is not an error. It is intentional. You stare at it, wondering, have you built something complete or something forever broken? This is not just a question about cardboard and paint. It is about how we define wholeness, perfection, and the meaning of an intentional flaw. Think of ancient Persian carpets, where master weavers would deliberately insert a mistake into their designs. Not because they were careless, but because they believed only God could be perfect, and for a human to create something flawless was to challenge the divine. The flaw became a signature of humility. The missing piece in your puzzle might serve the same purpose. A reminder that completion does not always mean perfection, and that perfection is not always complete. But the mind resists this. We are taught to crave closure. A story without an ending feels incomplete. A sentence without a period feels suspended in midair. The missing puzzle piece becomes a kind of mental itch, an unresolved chord that hums inside you long after you've walked away. You could tell yourself the picture is finished, that it is whole because it was intended to be this way. But some part of you will always imagine what could have been in that space. A single fragment holding the final detail, perhaps the glint in a character's eye or the last star in a painted sky. And because it is absent, the image becomes both more beautiful and more unbearable. We see this same tension in human lives. Imagine a person who seems to have it all: success, love, comfort, stability, yet carries a void inside them, a gap left by something that never existed. A lost childhood, an unanswered question, a relationship that was never allowed to form. Like the puzzle, their life might look whole from the outside, but they know it contains a permanent absence, built in from the start. Is that life broken? Or is the absence part of its truth, part of what makes it authentic? Some people learn to live with it, even cherish it. Others spend their lives searching for the missing piece, not realizing it cannot be found because it was never there to begin with. The missing piece can also be a test, a way to see if we can accept something for what it is, not for what we wish it could be. In art, this is sometimes called negative space. In music, it is the pause between notes that gives the melody shape. Without the silence, the sound loses meaning. Perhaps the designer of the puzzle understood this. Perhaps they knew that perfection is sterile, that it leaves no room for imagination, for longing. By leaving the piece out, they turn the puzzle into something living, an object that breathes because of its incompleteness. But there's a darker possibility too. What if the missing piece is a kind of trap? A way to keep you bound to the puzzle forever, unable to walk away because it is never truly done? This is how some relationships, ambitions, or obsessions work. They give you almost everything, but not the one thing you need to feel complete. That single, deliberate omission becomes the hook, keeping you engaged, invested, frustrated. The designer doesn't need to imprison you. They simply need to leave you with the haunting possibility of completion just out of reach. History gives us examples of such deliberate incompletion. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, a cathedral under construction for over a century, still stands unfinished. Not because it cannot be completed, but because its creator, Antoni Gaudí, saw the work as something that would outlive him, something meant to remain in motion. The unfinished state became part of its identity, making it both eternal and untouchable. The missing puzzle piece works the same way. It refuses to be tied to an endpoint. It denies you the satisfaction of closure, and in doing so, it ensures you will never forget it. Psychologists might tell you this triggers a phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency for people to remember incomplete tasks better than completed ones. Once something is finished, the mind lets it go, but leave it unfinished, and it will hover in your thoughts like a shadow. The missing piece ensures the puzzle stays alive in your memory, not as an image of what it is, but as an ache for what it could have been. In this way, incompletion becomes a form of immortality. So, is the puzzle whole? The answer depends on what you believe wholeness means. If wholeness is about following the Creator's intent, then yes, it is complete in its incompleteness, perfect in its imperfection. But if wholeness means every gap must be filled, every question answered, then no, it will always be broken, forever defined by what it lacks. And perhaps that is the truest form of beauty. Not the flawless diamond, but the cracked one that refracts light in ways perfection never could. Not the closed story, but the one that leaves you with questions. The missing piece asks us to live with mystery, to resist the urge to fix everything, to understand that absence is not always failure, that sometimes what's missing gives meaning to what's there. In a world obsessed with completion, with tying every thread into a neat bow, perhaps the most radical thing you can do is to leave something unfinished and to love it anyway. For maybe wholeness is not the absence of emptiness, but the ability to stand before the gap and call it beautiful. If you stare long enough at that final space in the puzzle, you might realize it is not empty at all. It is filled with possibility. And possibility, unlike any fixed piece, can take any shape you imagine. Perhaps that is the point. The puzzle was never broken. It was always waiting for you to decide what the missing piece could be. And maybe, just maybe, it was never the puzzle that was incomplete. It was you. The endless staircase choice. Imagine stepping onto a grand staircase. Its steps carved in perfect symmetry, spiraling upward into a place you cannot see. You take the first step, feeling the smooth stone under your feet. Then another, and another. Each one carries you higher, or so it seems. Your legs grow tired. Your breath quickens. The rail curves around you. The air shifts. The sound of your footsteps echoes in the same hollow tone. The staircase turns, bends, and twists, but never quite reveals where it ends. Minutes pass, then hours. But something in the back of your mind whispers that the view around you hasn't changed. You look down, yet somehow the ground floor is still there, just a few steps below. You look up, and the top is still out of reach, exactly where it was when you began. You walk again, determined to push through, convinced that if you keep going, you must arrive somewhere. Yet with each loop, you realize you are passing the same scratches on the banister, the same faint crack in the wall, the same shadow in the corner that looks like it's been watching you the whole time. This is the endless staircase, a paradox not of geometry alone, but of the mind. In mathematics, it's called an impossible object, like M.C. Escher's famous ascending and descending drawing. The stairs form a closed loop, each section rising relative to the one before, but arranged so that the final step returns seamlessly to the first. Your eyes insist you're climbing. Your body feels the strain. And yet, in the grand scheme, you haven't moved at all. It's not a journey. It's a cage disguised as progress. But the deeper truth is that the endless staircase is more than an optical illusion. It is a metaphor for the choices we make that seem to move us forward, but only lead us back to the start. It is the job that keeps promising promotion, but every next step only resets the climb. It is the relationship where every argument ends where it began, no matter how much ground you think you've covered. It is the cycle of habits, waking up determined to change, making a little progress, and finding yourself repeating the same mistakes again and again. The horror of the endless staircase is not that you are trapped. It's that you don't realize it at first. The first loop feels like movement. The second feels like perseverance. Only later does it start to feel like déjà vu, like the walls themselves are conspiring to hide the truth. You ask yourself, am I actually going anywhere? Or have I been walking in place my entire life? Some will say the staircase is an illusion, that the movement is all in your head, that once you understand the trick, you can step off it entirely. But others will argue the opposite, that life itself is made of staircases like this, and that the illusion of progress is what keeps us moving. After all, if you knew you were going nowhere, would you still take the next step? And here lies the real choice in the endless staircase. Do you keep walking, knowing you'll never reach the top, simply for the sake of moving? Or do you stop, risking the unsettling possibility that without motion, you have nothing at all? It is the quiet question that turns the staircase into a mirror, showing not where you are, but who you are. Because in the end, the endless staircase is not about stone, or wood, or even geometry. It is about the loops we build in our own minds, the paths we convince ourselves lead upward, the progress that may only be a beautifully crafted circle. And perhaps the only way to escape is not to reach the top, but to step sideways into a place where stairs no longer matter. The prophecy that prevents itself. Imagine a bell that only rings to warn of a fire that will never come. Because the moment it rings, everyone leaps to their feet with buckets and blankets and clear instructions, and the flames that were supposed to devour the town are smothered while they are still a spark. By nightfall, the streets are quiet, the houses intact, and people grow bold enough to laugh. They point to unburned roofs and say, "See, there was nothing to fear." But was the bell lying, Or did its truth erase its own evidence? This is the shape of a prophecy that prevents itself. A warning announces disaster. People change their behavior. The disaster never arrives, not because the prophecy was false, but because it was heard. And now the mind wants a verdict. Was it true or false? Was the seer wise or a fool? The answer hides in a place we rarely look, the world that would have happened if the warning had not been given. Start with something close to the ground. A meteorologist issues a forecast. A cyclone will strike the coast in 3 days. Evacuations begin. Stores close. Sandbags rise like a new shoreline. Roads empty of curiosity and fill with caution. On the 3rd day, the storm turns, weakens, dies in cold water before landfall. Commentators scoff. Hysteria, they say. Overreaction. But the forecast was not a promise. It was a conditional. If you do nothing, if you live as usual, here is the likely future. The future you avoided is invisible precisely because you avoided it. Or think of a medical model predicting a catastrophic epidemic unless drastic measures are taken. Quarantines, masks, shuttered schools, an abrupt reorganization of daily life. Case counts stay manageable. In the relief, a dangerous story appears. The models were wrong. But the model was never a crystal ball. It was a map of paths branching from the present. We took a different path. The absence of catastrophe is not proof it was never there. It is proof that choices matter. The logic becomes clearer when you step into counterfactuals, the study of what if. A self-preventing prophecy is a statement about a future that would occur in the nearest possible world, where the prophecy is not announced or not believed. In that neighboring world, the town burns, the sea rises over unprepared streets, the hospital corridors overflow. In our world, we rang the bell. The truth destroyed its own witness. The only evidence of the danger is the effort you see piled up everywhere. The sandbags, the empty stadium turned into a shelter, the line items in a budget labeled prevented harm. You don't see the avoided disaster. You see the shape of the precautions that erased it. This is why these prophecies feel so infuriating. Human beings are built to learn from outcomes. We respect a warning if the bad thing happens. We distrust it if the bad thing does not. But a self-preventing prophecy flips the lesson. The more effective it is, the less it looks justified afterward. If the plan worked perfectly, it will look unnecessary. We end up punishing success and rewarding failure, because failure leaves visible debris and success leaves nothing but an intact normalcy that feels boring and cheap. History is full of these vanishing victories. Engineers spent years hunting down the millennium bug in the code that ran banks, planes, power grids. They rewrote millions of lines, tested, retested. On January 1st, the lights stayed on. See, people said, all panic. Yet the missing catastrophe was the product of action, not the absence of risk. Or consider fire codes born of old infernos. Sprinklers, exits that swing outward, maximum occupancy limits. Every unburned crowd is a prophecy come true by failing to manifest. We don't praise the warning because nothing dramatic happened. We call it Tuesday. Self-preventing prophecies aren't just public. They are personal. A doctor tells you that, without changing your diet, your arteries will harden early. You listen. You change. 10 years later, your heart is strong. Some part of you wonders if the warning was theatrical. The better you are now, the more doubtful the old path feels. And yet, the shape of the life you did not live presses against the edges of this one. The prophecy is not measurable by what happened. It is measured by what didn't. There is a darker flavor of this paradox in economics. A central bank warns that inflation will spiral unless expectations are anchored. They telegraph rate hikes, dampen credit, signal coolness. Companies restrain prices, households trim spending. The spiral never forms. Critics declare the danger imaginary, but money lives on belief. The announcement is part of the mechanism. Talking changes behavior. The prophecy is an intervention disguised as a prediction. And there's a stranger version still, recursive systems where the prediction and the system dance. A security researcher says, If this vulnerability is not patched, a catastrophic breach will occur. Administrators patch. No breach follows. Skeptics claim the warning was exaggerated for attention. But the warning was the patch note written in human language. Without it, the exploit would have been a headline. With it, the event became a ghost. This loops us back to the question, was the prophecy true or false? If you judge truth only by the world you see, you will call it false. If you judge truth by the structure of cause and effect across neighboring worlds, the one where the prophecy is heard and the one where it is not, you will call it true. The prophecy made itself false. That is how it kept faith with reality. Yet there's a risk. If people come to believe that every unmaterialized disaster was invented, they will stop responding. The next prophecy will be met with a shrug. The fire will come. Self-preventing prophecies require a culture that can understand absence as evidence of success. They require patience with boredom, respect for prevention, a willingness to honor what did not happen. But we are creatures of drama. We want proof we can hold. We want the tidal wave on camera, the villain in handcuffs, the graph spiking, and then falling from a heroic intervention we can celebrate. Prevention offers none of that. It offers quiet, steady days, the highest form of safety masquerading as ordinary life. The paradox is that ordinary life is the monument to an invisible victory. At the center of this sits another riddle, agency. The prophecy changes the future, yes, but only if we are capable of being changed. A warning heard by those who cannot act is just noise. A warning heard by those who can act but refuse becomes a different kind of prediction, a self-fulfilling one. The ship sinks because the crew laughed at the chart. The timeline in which the prophecy prevents itself depends on listeners who can accept the discomfort of preparation without the reward of spectacle. We often speak of fate as a straight road you cannot step off. Self-preventing prophecies say fate is a road network with many exits. Most of them unmarked, most of them easiest to take when you still believe you might be wasting your time. The heroism here is small and uncinematic. Reading, testing, reinforcing, evacuating early, calling your neighbor, turning the gas off, learning how to use the extinguisher before you smell smoke. So how do you live with this paradox without becoming cynical on one side or gullible on the other? You ask different questions. Not, did the disaster happen, but what would have happened if we had done nothing, given what we know now? Not, was the warning perfect, but was the response proportionate to the plausible harm? You train your mind to see the shadow of the avoided world in the shape of the actions taken in this one. You become the kind of person who can celebrate the absence of a crisis as if it were a parade. And you hold two truths together without letting either one curdle into stupidity. First truth, some prophecies are manipulations, theater designed to extract attention, votes, or money. Second truth, many prophecies are lifelines that only look unnecessary if you judge them by the fires that never burned. Wisdom is not choosing one truth and discarding the other. It is learning to tell them apart when the evidence is silent because the system worked. So is the prophecy true or false? The honest answer is unsettling. It was true in the world it averted, and it had to become false in ours to keep its truth intact. It was a message sent to a different timeline that we, by listening, refuse to inhabit. If you need a simpler sentence to carry away, take this. A good warning is one that makes itself look wrong. The next time you hear the bell and see nothing burning, don't sneer. Look for the buckets stacked by the door, the drills that made muscle memory out of panic, the ordnance that quietly changed how a building breathes. Listen for the hush that follows skill, not luck. After a while, you may notice something profound. Ordinary life, the dinner table, the streetlight, the child asleep, is a museum of things that did not happen. Every intact day is a prophecy that prevented itself. The mirror with no reflection. You step toward the mirror expecting yourself. Your face, your eyes, the subtle movements you don't notice until you see them reflected. But the surface stays empty. Not black, not white, not fogged. Just absence. The frame holds a silence, so deep it feels physical, as if light itself refuses to acknowledge you. Your first thought is mechanical. Maybe it's not a mirror at all. Maybe it's glass-backed with something opaque, a trick of design. You wave your hand in front of it, lean closer, adjust your angle. The world around you is there, walls, furniture, the flicker of the overhead light, but you are not. The air parts where you stand, but nothing inhabits the gap. You are missing, and the missing has weight. It's tempting to call this impossible. Physics says that light bounces. Even if you were invisible, the mirror should reflect something where your body interrupts the background. Yet it doesn't. It's as if your existence has been selectively edited from this one surface. A clean erasure, with no smudge, no distortion. You begin to think less about the mirror and more about what a reflection actually is. We treat it as confirmation. I am here. It's not proof you exist. It's proof the world acknowledges your existence. When a mirror refuses you, it is not just denying your image. It is denying that you belong to reality's ledger. And that thought grows darker. If the mirror does not see you, maybe it's not the one that's wrong. Maybe the mirror is showing the truth, and every other surface, every shop window, every pool of water has been lying to you. Maybe you've been a phantom this whole time, and only now, in this one merciless frame, do you glimpse the real state of things. History has whispered of such objects. In some folklore, a mirror that refuses your reflection is an omen of death, not because it predicts you will die, but because it reveals you already have. In other tales, it marks you as something in between, a traveler slipping unnoticed between worlds. Vampires, spirits, the cursed, beings whose existence depends on staying unacknowledged by the physical laws the rest of us take for granted. You try logic. If the mirror shows nothing, then maybe nothing is what's really there. But the problem with logic is that it depends on definitions you assume are stable. You is a definition you've never doubted. A reflection is supposed to be an easy equation. Object plus light equals image. But the absence staring back at you suggests the equation might not include you anymore. You think of photographs. Cameras have mirrors too, lenses and sensors that catch what's in front of them. What would happen if you took one out right now? Would the image come back blank? Or worse, would it show something else standing where you are, something that wears your shape in the world but not in the mirror? The fear here is not about visibility. It's about ontology, about whether you're anchored to the same reality as the people around you. Mirrors are not just tools. They are agreements between you and the laws of the universe. If the agreement has been revoked, who decided that? And when? Maybe it's not an error at all. Maybe this mirror is a filter built to reveal only what truly exists on this side of reality. If you're absent, then you've been on the wrong side for longer than you think. You're looking through a hole into the world you thought you belonged to, and the world is looking back, seeing nothing. The longer you stare, the more you feel the absence pulling at you. There's a subtle pressure, not from the glass, but from the fact of not being in it. Your mind begins to catalog memories. The time someone didn't respond when you spoke, the times you walked into a room and felt like you weren't there until you made noise. Were those clues? Were you already fading? The question changes. It's no longer, is the mirror broken, but how long have I been missing? Maybe the reflection was never proof of you. It was part of the machinery that kept you stitched into reality. And now that machinery has failed, the stitch has come loose. The mirror is not malfunctioning. It's reporting status. You are unlisted. And here's the final thought that freezes you. If a mirror can tell you that you've slipped from reality, maybe it can also be the way back in. But to do that, it would have to know where you are now. And if the mirror shows nothing, maybe it's because there's nowhere left to find you. You stand there, staring at absence, wondering if this is the moment you finally admit the truth. You are not missing from the mirror. The mirror is showing you the first place you've ever truly belonged. The dice that always wins. There's a moment in every game when your heart pauses between the throw and the landing, where possibility hangs like a held breath. That thin space is where hope lives. Now imagine a die that always listens to you. You whisper 6, and it obeys. Again and again, your wish lands face up, a tiny miracle repeated until miracle becomes habit. At first you laugh, then you calculate, then you win. And strangely, the more you win, the more the room falls silent inside you. The die that always grants your desire is not a gift. It is a mirror that shows you how much of your joy came from not knowing. Without risk, victory is not a summit. It is a conveyor belt. You don't climb, you are carried. The first time you score the impossible roll, your body floods with heat, your chest opens, your mind crackles with electricity. By the 10th time, you feel clever. By the 50th, you feel nothing. The die keeps its promise. Your pulse refuses to care. We think we want certainty. We say it when we pray for outcomes, when we rehearse confessions, when we ask for signs. But meaning is a creature of contrast. If every day were summer, the word warm would evaporate. If every note were perfect, music would become a sterile grid. The tiny sway called swing, that delicious micro-uncertainty between beats, that's what makes your head nod. A flawless machine is impressive. A fallible musician is moving. The die that always wins removes the wobble from life, and with it the pulse that made your victories feel alive. Consider gamblers who chase the rush. It isn't the money, it's the maybe. The body writes a chemical contract with chance. Dopamine blooms not when the prize arrives, but when the prize might arrive. The variable reward is a hook that goes straight into the oldest circuits we have. Your conqueror die cancels the variable. It strips the world to a series of guaranteed transfers. You don't gamble, you harvest. Harvesting is work. Work, repeated without surprise, becomes numbness with a paycheck. Try it on love. If you could roll a person's heart and always land on yes, what happens to devotion? Courtship becomes a script. Apology becomes a lever. Forgiveness becomes a button you press. A love that cannot be lost cannot be cherished. It can only be owned. Ownership is not intimacy. It is possession. The die offers power, and power can shelter you. But it cannot make anyone's gaze feel like sunlight on a winter day. In science, randomness is not noise we hate. It is information we learn from. Mutation is the dice of life. Shake the genome forever into the same outcome, and you erase the ladder evolution climbs. Even machines need uncertainty. Cryptography collapses if numbers can be predicted. Fairness dies when outcomes are rigged. A world that always lands as ordered is not a world. It is a diagram. Diagrams are useful. They're not alive. Think of stories. No one turns pages when they already know the ending. Suspense is the slow-burn electricity of what could go wrong. Heroes become heroes because they can fail. A hero guaranteed to survive is no hero. He is a statue moving through a storm that politely steps aside. Your die hands you a statue's fate, invulnerable and therefore uninteresting. You will outrun every danger, but the road will forget you ran. There's an ethics here too. When you can force the world to say yes, other people become scenery. Their choices no longer matter. Consent erodes into compliance disguised as fortune. Every table becomes a stage where your will presses its thumb on the scale. And when everything bends, you never discover where you end and the world begins. Boundaries, those precious lines that teach us humility, dissolve. Maybe you think the solution is moderation. Promise outcomes only when the stakes are low. Use the die for free dessert, not for war. But this is how rot spreads, quietly, helpfully. Win enough small certainties, and you will start to resent anything that refuses to obey. Entitlement grows where possibility dies. Then one day you look up and realize you haven't asked a true question in months. Questions need a future that could answer no. There's another hunger hidden inside the die. The hunger to be the one who asks and receives, to feel chosen by the universe. But a universe that always says yes is not choosing you. You're choosing yourself. The sacred shiver of gratitude requires surprise. Without surprise, gratitude withers into transaction. You don't whisper, "Thank you." You say, "Of course." I want you to imagine a final game. You stand in a room with a long table and a single candle. Across from you sits a child version of yourself, knees scuffed, eyes bright. You roll the faithful die and hand them every answered wish you once begged for. Ace exams, perfect friends, perfect body, perfect love, perfect future. Watch their face soften, then flatten, then fade into a practiced smile. Give them a life without risk, and you give them a life without courage. Give them a life without courage, and you give them a life without wonder. Give them a life without wonder, and you will watch their bright eyes learn to dim. Entropy, that patient accountant, teaches meaning by making loss possible. Every flame burns because fuel ends. Every morning is bright because nights are dark and finite. The die that always wins wages war against entropy and, in doing so, empties victory of its weight. What you defeat without chance you never truly meet. You sidestep it. You cannot respect what you do not risk. So what is randomness? It is not chaos for chaos's sake. It is the rough texture that lets your fingers grip the world. It is the distance between desire and destiny, where effort has room to matter. It is the silence between notes that lets the melody breathe. It is the rain forecast that might be wrong, making your umbrella a decision rather than a habit. Randomness hurts because it can betray us. But only something that can betray you can make your trust real. There's a darker cost. A die that obeys you is also a die that teaches you are the center. Each roll becomes an echo of your own voice. Echo long enough, and you forget there were other voices. Solitude masquerades as mastery. Loneliness comes wearing a crown. Some people drown in oceans, others drown in mirrors. If I handed you this die, would you take it? Perhaps you would say yes, with conditions. Use it to protect the people you love. Use it to save lives. And yes, mercy is a good use of power. But somewhere, some night, you would sit in the quiet and realize that even mercy requires the possibility of harm to be mercy at all. If everyone is always saved, the word save dissolves. You didn't save anyone. The script saved itself. Meaning, then, is a triangle: desire, effort, uncertainty. Remove any corner and the shape collapses. Desire without effort is fantasy. Effort without uncertainty is labor. Uncertainty without desire is drift. The sweet spot where we feel most awake is where we lean forward into not knowing and push anyway. That push writes the story line by line. So, keep your die if you must. Lock in a box. Roll it for parlor tricks. But when the choice matters, choose a world that can surprise you. Choose to fail cleanly and win honestly. Let some prayers go unanswered so that when one lands, you feel the room ring. Let the note tremble. Let the coin spin. Let the heart risk. Randomness is not the enemy of meaning. It is the soil where meaning grows. And when the table goes quiet again, when the old thrill surges and your hand hovers over chance, you will understand why each honest roll makes the world brighter. Not because the number is right, but because for one beautiful second, you were brave enough not to know. The hourglass with no sand, you find yourself staring at an hourglass. Its shape is familiar. Two delicate glass bulbs joined by a narrow neck, framed in polished wood. You expect to see sand trickling through, marking the steady march of seconds. But there is no movement. The bottom bulb lies empty, its glass bare. The top bulb is not full either. It holds nothing. No grains waiting to fall, no countdown to begin. It is an hourglass with no sand. At first, you think it's broken. Maybe the sand leaked out. Maybe someone forgot to fill it. But as you keep looking, the unsettling truth forms in your mind. This is not a mistake. It was designed this way. A timekeeper without time to keep. The absence is deliberate. And suddenly, the question isn't about what happened to the sand. It's about you. Are you standing in a moment that exists outside the reach of time? Or are you trapped in a pause that will never end? We are so used to measuring life in movement. Clock hands ticking, shadows stretching, heartbeats counting away the hours. Without that, we feel unmoored. The hourglass before you gives no anchor, no evidence that time exists at all. It could be morning or midnight, yesterday or 1,000 years from now. Without sand, there's no before and no after. Just an unbroken now. That can be terrifying or liberating. Think about the moments in life when time seems to disappear. Lovers lost in each other's eyes, forgetting the world outside. A child so absorbed in play that hours pass unnoticed. A painter who looks up from their canvas, to find night has fallen. These moments feel timeless, not because time has stopped, but because our awareness of it has slipped away. The hourglass with no sand could be that, a symbol of pure presence, of life lived without the ticking clock looming overhead. But there's another side. Imagine waiting for something, news that could change your life, a reunion, an escape, and realizing the wait has no end. You can't count down because there's nothing to count. The missing sand becomes a kind of prison. You are held in a still frame, unable to move forward, unable to look back. Psychologists call this temporal dislocation, the sensation of being cut loose from time's flow. People who have experienced solitary confinement often describe it. So do survivors of deep trauma. Without the markers of change, the mind begins to fray. The stillness becomes suffocating. And maybe that's what this empty hourglass really is, a test. Without sand, you can't measure patience. You can't know how long you've been here. You have to face the raw reality of being in a moment with no visible exit. Some would panic clawing at the glass, demanding movement. Others would surrender to it, letting go of the idea that life must always be in motion to be meaningful. Philosophers have wrestled with this idea for centuries. Augustine wondered if time exists at all, or if it is just the mind's way of measuring change. Buddhists speak of the eternal now, where past and future dissolve. The hourglass with no sand could be the ultimate expression of that truth. Time is an illusion, and the moment you're in is infinite. The glass is empty because there was never any sand to begin with. But the human mind resists infinity. We crave beginnings and endings. We want to flip the hourglass, watch the grains fall, feel the satisfaction of an ending earned. Without that, we start to question ourselves. Have we fallen outside of reality? Has the world forgotten us? Or is this the natural state of existence, and everything else, every clock, every deadline, every calendar, just a story we tell to make sense of it? There is also the haunting possibility that the hourglass once had sand, and it's all gone now. Every grain has fallen, and we simply arrived too late. If that's true, then we are not in a pause at all. We are in the aftermath. Time has already run its course. Whatever was meant to happen, happened. And what's left is this, an eternal echo after the final grain has touched the bottom. So what do you do in a world with no sand? You could try to fill the hourglass yourself, to invent your own measure of time. You could decide that one breath is a second, or one heartbeat is a minute. You could create your own beginning and ending. Or you could leave it as it is, empty, and learn to live without the safety net of the ticking clock. Maybe that's the true challenge here. Not to fix the hourglass, not to escape the stillness, but to understand it. To see that life without sand is not necessarily lifeless. That sometimes the absence of movement is the presence of something deeper. Awareness, clarity, the space to exist without rushing toward what's next. The hourglass with no sand will never tell you how much time you have left. It will never urge you forward or pull you back. It will simply stand there, silent, a mirror for your own relationship with time. Some will see it as a curse. Others will see it as freedom. And perhaps the truth is that it can be both. Because in the end, the question is not whether the hourglass is empty. The question is whether you can live in the emptiness without demanding it be filled. The question that can't be asked. There is a story whispered among philosophers, linguists, and the kind of thinkers who lose sleep staring at the ceiling, searching for the edges of thought itself. It begins with a question so strange that it cannot survive the act of being asked. Not because it is forbidden, not because it is dangerous in any physical way, but because the moment you try to put it into words, it changes. The moment you understand it, its meaning slips into something else entirely. And the moment you think you have answered it, it vanishes, leaving only an emptiness where it once seemed to be. It is called the question that can't be asked. At first glance, that sounds absurd. We ask questions every day, from the mundane to the profound. But this one doesn't work like normal questions. It lives in a space between language and thought, between what can be formed in the mind and what can be expressed in sound. Imagine holding a soap bubble in your hand, perfect, delicate, shimmering with color. The moment you try to grip it tighter, it bursts. The question is like that. It exists in a fragile mental form that collapses when you try to handle it too directly. Think about how language shapes what we can even think. If I ask you, what is the color of time? Your brain strains to make sense of it, bending language and perception to find an answer. But the question that can't be asked is worse. It rewrites itself mid-thought. You begin with one meaning, but as you understand it, the meaning mutates. Like chasing a shadow in a shifting light, you never arrive where you intended. Here's one way to think of it. Imagine asking, what will my last thought be before I die? The moment you consider it, you're no longer in the mental state that question requires. You've altered the conditions simply by asking. If you try to answer, you create a false version of the moment, and the real answer dissolves before you can reach it. You can get close, but the real thing hides in the gap between your attempt and the truth. Or consider a deeper example from physics and philosophy. In quantum mechanics, the act of measurement changes what is being measured. Asking, where is this particle exactly right now, forces it into a position that didn't exist in the same way before the question. The question changes the reality it's about. The question that can't be asked behaves the same way, but not with particles, with meaning itself. You approach it with one intention, but your approach reshapes it, making the original question ungraspable. Some thinkers compare it to the liar's paradox, the statement, this sentence is false. If it's true, it's false. If it's false, it's true. But the question that can't be asked is slipperier than that. It's not a static paradox. It's alive in the sense that it changes based on your mental state. It doesn't trap you in contradiction. It lures you forward, then pulls away like a horizon that retreats no matter how far you walk. Now imagine the temptation of it. There are people who have devoted their lives to trying to find this question, to articulate it perfectly. They report fleeting glimpses, a sudden flash of understanding at the edge of sleep, a strange moment during meditation, a jolt of clarity in a dream. For a few seconds, they feel they have it. They can almost form the words. And then, like a name on the tip of the tongue, it slips away. All that's left is a sense of loss and a nagging certainty that they were holding something impossible and precious. It's not just an abstract curiosity. The question that can't be asked has real-world echoes in the way we live. Think about moments of deep self-reflection. You might ask, am I truly happy? But the moment you ask it, you're no longer simply experiencing your life. You are analyzing it. And the analysis changes the state you're trying to observe. Your happiness might fade under the weight of the question, or you might invent an answer to satisfy yourself, neither of which reflects the original truth. Or think about love. If you ask, do I truly love this person? You're already looking at the feeling from the outside, not living it from the inside. The pure experience changes the moment it's inspected. That's the same dynamic. The act of asking transforms the subject, and the answer you get is not the one you thought you were chasing. This is why some call it the philosopher's mirage. You can walk toward it for years, convinced you're getting closer, but the landscape reshapes itself with every step. By the time you reach where you thought it would be, it's already somewhere else. The journey doesn't just fail to give you the answer. It changes the nature of the answer so that it's never what you started looking for. There's another layer to this, an unsettling one. If such a question truly exists, then maybe there are truths we can never access, not because they are hidden, but because the act of seeking them destroys them. And if that's true, then the limits of human understanding aren't just about what we don't yet know. They're built into the structure of thought itself. Our minds might be wired in a way that makes certain truths forever out of reach, not because they're too far away, but because they dissolve when we look too closely. And yet, people still search. They still climb toward it like it's the top of an invisible mountain. Because there's something intoxicating about chasing what you can never catch. Maybe that's the real heart of the question that can't be asked. It's less about the answer and more about the pursuit. The constant pulling forward, the feeling that you're brushing against the edge of something infinite, something beyond words. So the next time you feel a thought slip away, just as you try to capture it, the next time you sense that there's a question you almost have but can't quite hold, ask yourself, Was that it? Did you just brush against the impossible? Or was it only your mind playing tricks, feeding you the shape of something that can't survive the light? And if you did have it, if for a split second you truly understood it, would you even know? Or would the knowing itself be the very thing that made it disappear? The target that moves, picture yourself in a wide, open field holding a bow. Far ahead, gleaming in the sun, stands a target. It seems steady, fixed, almost inviting. You pull the string back, breath slow, eye focused. The moment you release, the instant the arrow leaves your fingers, the target moves. Not far, not enough to make you think it's alive. Just enough that your arrow misses, thudding harmlessly into the grass. You adjust. You step forward. You line up another shot. This time, you're sure of it. You've calculated the wind, steadied your hands, remembered the lesson from your last miss. The arrow flies, and again, the target isn't where you aimed. It keeps happening. No matter how many times you shoot, no matter how carefully you measure, the center is always somewhere else by the time your effort arrives. And slowly, a thought creeps in. Has the target always been moving? Or is it that you're always just a little too late? This is the target that moves, a metaphor for truth itself. We like to imagine truth as a fixed point, something we can aim at, approach, and eventually strike dead center. But reality plays a crueler game. Sometimes the facts themselves change. New evidence appears. New contexts reshape old conclusions. What was true last year no longer fits today's world. Other times, the truth doesn't move at all, but we only realize what it really was after it's already shifted out of reach. Our perception lagging just enough to turn precision into guesswork. Think of science. For centuries, we knew the Earth was the center of the universe. The math seemed to work. The models aligned. Then came Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, each pulling the target to a new place. Later, Newton's perfect laws ruled the cosmos, until Einstein's relativity bent space and time itself. Today's cutting-edge theories, elegant as they are, may one day look as outdated as the geocentric model does to us. Science isn't broken. It's just that the target moves every time our arrows get close. Or look at history. How many times have societies been certain about the causes of an event, only for new archives, uncovered letters, or hidden testimonies to alter the entire story? The truth of the past doesn't change, but our map of it does. And each time we redraw that map, the center shifts. Yesterday's historical bullseye becomes today's misconception. In personal life, the target that moves can feel even more disorienting. You think you understand someone completely, what they want, who they are, only for them to change in ways you didn't see coming. Or perhaps it wasn't them who changed, but your understanding of them. What felt like the truth about your relationship was simply the version you could see from where you stood. Move a little closer, live a little longer, and the aim has to change. Sometimes the movement isn't in the target at all. It's in us. Our values evolve. Our perception sharpens. Our understanding of what truth even means deepens. The arrow we shoot at age 20 is not the same as the one we shoot at 50. Even if the truth stood still, the archer changes and the angle changes with them. This shifting can be frustrating, even maddening. If truth keeps moving, can we ever claim to know anything? Some people respond by locking onto an earlier position and refusing to adjust. They convince themselves that their first shot was perfect, and if it missed, it must be the target's fault. Others take the opposite approach. They never aim for the center at all, because they've decided the center is an illusion. Why shoot if it will never stay still long enough to hit? But perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. If truth is alive, if it breathes and shifts with the unfolding of time, then the skill isn't in hitting it once and forever. It's in learning to track it as it moves. To accept that the arrow you launch today may only bring you closer, not arrive at perfection. That knowing is not a single strike, but a series of adjustments. The target that moves forces us to ask, is truth itself unstable, or is our ability to perceive it forever catching up? If it moves because the world changes, then our task is to stay alert, never mistaking today's accuracy for eternal certainty. If it's our perception that lags, then the work is to close that gap, to train the eye and hand until they anticipate the movement. In either case, the target will keep shifting. It may not do so out of malice. It may simply be the nature of reality. A universe that is still would be dead. A truth that never changes would be lifeless. The motion is a sign that the world is alive, that understanding is not an endpoint, but a chase. And maybe that's the real meaning here. Truth was never a static prize to win and mount on the wall. It was always the moving target, the one that forces you to stay in motion, to adapt, to keep shooting. Not to hit it once, but to remain in the game for as long as you can draw the bow. Because in the end, the arrow isn't the only thing flying toward the target. The target is coming toward you too, and the only question is whether you will be ready when your paths meet, however briefly, in the shifting center of what's real. The door you already passed, you grip the handle, push, and step through. The hinges groan, the frame shivers. You're certain you've crossed the threshold, one space exchanged for another. But when your foot lands, the world hasn't changed. The air feels the same. The light falls in the same patterns. You're standing where you began, as though the door never moved you at all. Your first instinct is simple. You turn around by mistake. Maybe the door spins you without your noticing. Maybe you got disoriented. You try again, one hand on the frame to steady yourself, the other twisting the knob with deliberate force. The door swings wide. You step through slowly, counting the motion. 1, 2, 3, and still you are here. Exactly here. It's only when you check the details that the unease starts. The objects around you are familiar, but not identical. The mug on the table is in your hand's favorite position, but it's half an inch closer to the edge. The book you left open is on the same page, but the crease in the spine is deeper, as if it's been read more times than you remember. A jacket that you swear you tossed onto a chair is now hanging neatly. These are not the same things you left, they're echoes of them. You begin to wonder if you moved at all. Movement, after all, is just change in position over time. But if time itself bent, if it doubled back on itself without you noticing, you could walk forever and never leave. The door might not be a passage between spaces, but between moments. Moments so close together they blur into one, looping invisibly until you are trapped in the thinnest slice of now. Your mind searches for analogies. It's like a skipped groove on a vinyl record, where the same few seconds repeat seamlessly until you notice the needle stutter. Or a digital video that freezes on a frame, but the audio keeps running, tricking you into thinking it's still moving forward. If you're the needle, if you're the frozen frame, how would you ever know? And here's the terrifying part. Maybe you didn't step through the door just now. Maybe you've been stepping through it for hours, days, years, each loop erasing the memory of the last. That would explain the tiny shifts in detail. Each pass through the loop wearing the world down in ways you can't see unless you look too closely. Your coffee cools by imperceptible degrees. The shadows crawl an inch and then snap back. This raises a deeper, stranger possibility. If the door is not moving you forward in time, perhaps it is moving you backward, rewinding you to just before you opened it, every time you open it. The you that stands here now is not the same you that stood here before. It's a newer version, overwritten with the memory of an action you never completed. The door is not a passage. It's an editor cutting your life down to the same scene over and over. What happens if you refuse to open it again? Do you finally move on? Or does the loop collapse entirely, erasing everything outside this moment? And what if the door isn't the cause? What if the door is the only thing showing you the truth, that you've been looping all along, and without it, you'd never even suspect? There's a final thought that won't leave you. If the door really does lead somewhere else, another place, another time, maybe you've already gone through. Maybe you made it to the other side days ago, months ago, and the place you're in now is not the original room, but the perfect copy that waited there for you. You passed through once. You just don't remember it. And the you that's here now is not the one who began this journey, but the one who's been here all along, watching the handle turn again and again. And in that moment, you realize something even worse. You don't need to open the door to be trapped by it. The trap is knowing that somewhere, at some point, you already did. The statement that destroys logic. It looks like nothing, a short, unthreatening sentence sitting there like any other. This statement is false. 16 letters, 4 words, and a period. You could pass over it without a second glance. But the moment you stop, the moment you actually read it, you feel the floor tilt beneath you. Your mind tries to slot it into one of its neat categories, true or false. That's how we navigate the world. Facts and lies, reality and fiction. But here's the trap. Whichever way you go, the ground caves in. If the statement is true, then what it says must be correct. It's false. But if it's false, that means what it says isn't correct, which means it must be true. Truth folds into falsehood, falsehood folds into truth, and you're caught in the loop. This is the liar paradox, one of the oldest mind weapons in philosophy, traced back to at least 600 BCE when the philosopher Epimenides, a Cretan, said, "All Cretans are liars." If he was telling the truth, then he was lying. If he was lying, then he was telling the truth. The statement spins in an endless, self-consuming circle, a serpent eating its own tail. And your mind, conditioned to find an escape, keeps running into walls. At first, it feels like a word trick, clever but harmless. Then you realize this isn't about words. It's about the foundations of reasoning itself. Logic works because we assume statements can be evaluated as either true or false, a binary switchboard that lets us build everything from legal arguments to computer programs. The liar paradox jams the switchboard. You can't assign it a value without breaking the rules you started with. Imagine your brain as a courtroom, the statement as a witness. The judge asks, "Are you telling the truth?" The witness answers, "No." The judge frowns. If they believe the witness, then the witness is lying. But if they conclude the witness is lying, then the witness must be telling the truth. The trial can't end. The gavel never falls. The system is locked in its own gears. This paradox is not just a philosopher's party trick. It has consequences. The self-referential loop it exposes is the same kind of loop that haunts mathematics, language, and even artificial intelligence. In the 20th century, logician Kurt Gödel used a similar form of self-reference to prove his incompleteness theorems, showing that in any sufficiently complex mathematical system, there are statements that can be neither proved nor disproved within that system. It wasn't a flaw in the math. It was a feature of reality itself. Think about that. No matter how perfect your reasoning machine, there will always be truths it cannot reach without stepping outside itself. The liar paradox is a flashlight into that shadow. It says, here, in this sentence, is the wall where logic stops. And in doing so, it forces you to ask, if our entire understanding of the world is built on logic, what exists beyond that wall? There's a psychological dimension too. Our minds crave closure. We are uneasy when things remain unsettled. That's why cliffhangers gnaw at us, why unanswered questions can keep us awake. The liar paradox is a cliffhanger with no next episode. It holds you in the tension forever. Accept it as true and you are wrong. Accept it as false and you are wrong. Refuse to answer and you admit there's something your mind cannot conquer. That admission is unsettling because it means there may be other truths, bigger truths, that logic itself will never let you touch. You see this in ethics too. What happens when a moral statement undermines itself? Suppose someone says, the only moral rule is to break all moral rules. If you follow it, you've broken the one rule by following it. If you ignore it, you've broken it by refusing to break it. This is the liar paradox in moral clothing, an instruction that destroys itself in the act of being obeyed or disobeyed. The danger is not that the statement breaks logic, it's that it shows logic was never airtight to begin with. Like a magician revealing the trapdoor, the paradox shows that the stage of reason is built on invisible choices about how we define truth. We like to believe those definitions are solid, objective, unshakable, but they are choices. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Some people try to escape by inventing a third category, neither true nor false. But then the paradox asks, Is that third category assignment itself true or false? The serpent smiles and bites its tail again. Others dodge by saying the statement is meaningless. But is it true that it's meaningless? You can feel the circle tightening. Perhaps the most unsettling part is this. The paradox is not a broken statement. It is perfectly constructed. It's us, the way we think, that makes it impossible to settle. We want to pin the butterfly of truth to the corkboard. The liar paradox is the butterfly that lives forever in flight, wings beating between true and false, never landing. And so, the question becomes, is reality itself built with these loops inside it? Are there events, facts, or truths out there that can only exist in this twilight zone between yes and no? If so, then perhaps this statement is false, is not just a clever line. It's a doorway to the edges of human comprehension, a small, sharp reminder that the map of logic does not cover the whole of the territory we live in. And maybe, just maybe, the real paradox is not the sentence at all. It's us, the creatures who can know the trap exists and still be unable to stop walking straight into it. The trap that needs belief, picture this. You're walking through an unfamiliar place, a corridor in an old building, a clearing in a forest, a street you've never taken before. You don't notice the moment it happens, but you've stepped into something. There are no walls, no ropes, no visible snare. Just a sense, subtle at first, that something is holding you here. You don't see the trap. You feel it. And then someone, maybe a voice from nowhere, maybe a memory you can't place, whispers, "It only works if you believe in it." Your first reaction is almost a laugh. That's easy then. I just won't believe. But even as you think it, your mind is already tangled. Because what does not believing even mean once the seed is planted? You know the trap exists now, whether or not you want to believe. The moment you were told the rules became part of you. This is the genius of the belief trap. It doesn't need chains or locks. It needs only your mind. It functions like a parasite of thought, feeding on attention, tightening its hold the more you try to deny it. You can't run from it because you carry it with you. You can't destroy it because it exists in the same space as your own awareness. It's the magician's trick performed inside your skull. The prison whose bars are built from ideas you can't unthink. We see versions of this everywhere in human life. Superstitions are small belief traps. Someone tells you it's bad luck to walk under a ladder, and even if you mock it, a part of you hesitates. You don't really believe, but you don't test it either. Curses, prophecies, urban legends, they operate on the same principle. They have no power until they enter your mind, and once they do, they can bend your choices, guide your steps, even control your fears. But the real danger of a belief trap is not when you believe too much. It's when you stop believing at the wrong moment. Imagine you're standing in a circle drawn on the ground, told that stepping out will wake something dangerous. At first, you're cautious, but over time, your belief frays. This is nonsense, you think. You take a step out, and that's when springs. Maybe the trap needed you to stay just long enough for something to find you. Maybe disbelief was the final trigger, the release mechanism. By refusing to play, you finish the game. There's a cruel symmetry to it. Belief keeps you bound. Disbelief sets you free, or seals your fate. You can't tell which until it's over, and by then it's too late. This is why some of the most dangerous traps in history were not built from steel, but from faith. Witch trials, loyalty oaths, ideological purges, they were all belief traps. Step inside, and you could never leave without losing something vital. Your freedom, your reputation, your life. Stay inside, and you might survive, but at the cost of your mind. Psychologists have a term for the mind's inability to let go of certain ideas once they're planted. The irreversibility of thought. If I tell you to imagine a black swan in a red sky, you can't unsee it now. If I tell you that something terrible will happen if you open a certain door, your hand will hesitate on the handle, even if you know it's nonsense. The belief trap uses this flaw in human thought. It gives you an idea that can't be erased, then forces you to live in its shadow. Worse still, some belief traps don't even need to be true to work. They just need to make you act as if they're true. Think of a con artist who tells you your money is cursed and only they can cleanse it. You might not believe in curses, but the idea gnaws at you until you hand it over just in case. You've taken the bait without ever fully accepting it. The trap doesn't need your devotion, just your hesitation. And yet, there's another layer. What if the belief trap isn't external at all? What if it's your own self-imposed limit? I could never do that. I'm not the kind of person who it's impossible for me to change. These are personal traps that collapse if you stop believing in them. But by the time you do, years may have passed, opportunities gone forever. In that way, disbelief comes too late, sealing your fate, not because the trap punishes you, but because life has moved on without you. So how do you escape a trap that needs belief? You can't fight it head-on, because fighting is still engagement. You can't pretend it never existed, because you already know it does. The only way out is to change the terms, to treat belief itself as a tool you can switch on and off, not a chain that binds you. To walk the knife's edge between knowing the trap's rules and refusing to be ruled by them. But this balance is fragile. Tilt too far into belief, and you'll stay forever inside. Tilt too far into disbelief, and you might walk into the moment it's been waiting for. Which means the most dangerous thing about a belief trap is not that it imprisons you, but that it makes you uncertain whether you've already triggered it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the final twist. The trap doesn't care if you believe or not. It only cares that you keep thinking about it. That's the true snare. Once you've heard about it, you're already inside. The observer that changes outcome. Imagine a room with a single candle burning in the center. Its flame dances quietly, unbothered, until you open the door to look at it. In that moment, the air you've disturbed changes the flicker. You wanted to witness the flame as it was, untouched, but the very act of entering has rewritten it. Now the question begins to haunt you. Did you see the flame, or only the flame your presence created? This is the dilemma of the observer that changes outcome, a paradox that sits at the crossroads of physics, psychology, and philosophy. It is the unsettling realization that the moment you look at something, you're no longer a passive witness. You're a participant. Your observation has already entered the scene, nudging it into a slightly different shape. In the realm of quantum physics, this idea is not a metaphor, but a measurable fact. Subatomic particles exist in a haze of possibilities, a probability cloud, until they are measured. The instant we observe them, their indeterminate state collapses into one outcome. This is not because the particle knows we're looking in some mystical sense, but because the act of measurement involves interaction. It disturbs what it touches. Shine light on an electron to see where it is, and the photon you send collides with it, shifting its position. You didn't just watch, you pushed. The unsettling part is that this principle doesn't live only in the microscopic world. In human life, the same thing happens in subtler ways. Try to study people in their natural behavior, and the knowledge of being watched alters them. Employees work differently when the boss is in the room. Children play differently when their parents are nearby. Even in private, the idea of an unseen audience, real or imagined, can change choices. The thing you want to observe unspoiled becomes something else the moment it knows it is seen. Psychology has a name for this, the observer effect. A simple survey can change the answers people give because the act of asking signals what kinds of responses are acceptable. Interview someone about their daily routine, and they might unconsciously adjust their habits beforehand, presenting the version of themselves they want recorded. Your presence isn't neutral. It's a ripple that moves through the water long before you see the reflection. This loops us into a deeper question. Can anything be truly known without reshaping it? If the world responds to our gaze, then every scrap of knowledge we gather is tangled with our influence. The truth we record is always the truth filtered through the act of looking. You can measure the height of a sand dune, but your footprints will already have changed its edges. You can photograph a landscape, but the choice of frame and angle has already decided what is part of the truth and what is left out. Some philosophers argue that there is no way to untangle the observer from the observed. that all knowledge is co-created between the thing and the witness. In this view, reality as we know, it is not the world as it exists without us, but the world in constant conversation with our presence. The moment you enter the room, the candlelight has a new story to tell. Not because the flame is conscious, but because the air shifted, the shadows bent, the temperature altered. But there's another layer, one even more unsettling. If we can never know a thing exactly as it is without changing it, then maybe the true version without us is not something we can even meaningfully talk about. The unobserved world might be like a book in a language we can't read. Existing, yes, but forever beyond the reach of comprehension. Our only version is the one that's been touched, translated, shaped by the act of knowing. And this has consequences far beyond science. Think about justice. A courtroom witness describes an event, but their memory has been altered by the questions asked, by the way the story has been retold, by the awareness that their words are shaping someone's fate. Think about history. The moment a historian begins to write about the past, choices about what to include, what to omit, what to emphasize, are already shaping how that past will be remembered. Observation and creation blur until they are indistinguishable. Even self-knowledge is caught in the same net. Look too closely at your own thoughts, and you start performing for yourself. The act of watching, your mind changes the mind you are watching. Meditators know this intimately. The moment you notice your breath, it is no longer the same unconscious breath you were taking before. The observer is always bending the outcome, even when the observer and the observed are the same person. This is where the paradox turns sharp. If we insist on purity, on knowing without touching, we may end up knowing nothing at all. If we accept that we will always leave fingerprints on the truth, then perhaps our task is not to avoid influence, but to account for it. To acknowledge the wind we bring into the room, the weight we add to the floorboards, the ripples we send through the air. Because perhaps reality is not a fixed painting we stand before, but a river we step into. The moment our foot touches the water, the current shifts. The river we describe will always be the river that existed in that moment of our touch. And maybe that's all truth ever is, the version of the world that exists in the space between it and our gaze. So can anything be truly known without reshaping it in the process? If you mean known exactly as it is without us, the answer might be no. But if you mean known as it exists when we meet it, then yes, that's the only kind of truth we've ever had. The candle's flame will always flicker when we open the door, and that flicker is as real as any stillness it might have had before. In the end, the observer that changes outcome is not a flaw in the act of knowing. It is the nature of knowing itself. We do not stand apart from the world, capturing it unchanged. We are in it, moved by it. Every truth we hold is a meeting point, a shared moment between our gaze and the thing gazed upon, both changed by the encounter. And maybe that shared moment is the most honest truth we'll ever find. The box with no inside. You lift the lid expecting space, air, hollowness, darkness, something your eyes can register, even if it's just the absence of objects. But what greets you is not emptiness. It's nothing. Your vision doesn't meet black or white or shadow. It simply stops, as if the inside of the box has been cut away from existence itself. You can't tell how deep it is because depth does not apply. You can't tell if it's wide because width is meaningless. The inside is not empty. It's absent. Your mind stumbles over this. Emptiness is still something. A glass with no water still has air. A room without furniture still has light, dust, temperature. Even a vacuum of space has particles, radiation, potential. This is different. This is the absence of space itself. A place where inside doesn't exist. Your eyes cannot adjust because there's nothing to adjust to. It's not dark in there. It's not bright either. It's off. You try a test. You drop a coin. It doesn't fall. It doesn't hit a bottom. It doesn't vanish. It simply stops being. The sound of it dropping never comes. Your hand feels the moment of release, and then your senses lose it completely. You reach in after it, but your arm refuses to enter. not because something blocks it, but because there is nowhere for it to go. The space your arm would occupy inside the box is not possible. This is where the philosophical weight begins to crush in. Can something contain nothing? Not emptiness, but a literal absence of reality. Without that absence spilling outward, the box is a boundary between existence and whatever this is. Its edges are in our world, but the inside is not part of our universe at all. It's not a void within space. It's a hole in space. Physics says you can't have nowhere inside somewhere without tearing the rules apart. Even black holes, those cosmic monsters, are still part of space-time. They warp it, crush it, but they exist within it. This is not that. This is as if someone removed the very concept of inside from this box. You could pour oceans into it, and they would not fill. The water would simply cease. You begin to think about meaning. If an inside can be erased, could an outside be too? Could there be places in your life, whole chunks of time, whole memories, that are not empty but absent, like the coin you dropped? Not lost, not destroyed, but never there at all? If the box can exist with a missing interior, could a person exist with a missing core? Could you? Your hand trembles on the lid. You start to wonder if looking into nothing is safe. Your senses are anchored by the world reflecting back at you. Light bouncing off walls, air pressing against skin, sound returning from surfaces. Here, nothing bounces. If you stared long enough, would your mind start to unravel without that feedback? Would your sense of self start to fade, piece by piece like the coin? An idea creeps in. What if the box isn't containing nothing? What if it's connected to somewhere else entirely? Somewhere without dimensions, without time, without form. And what if nothing is simply how your mind translates what it can't translate at all? You're not seeing absence. You're seeing the failure of seeing. And then the worst thought, if the box truly has no inside, then it has no place to store the fact that you opened it. Meaning your action never happened, not in a way that reality can keep. The lid's movement, your curiosity, your coin, they're already gone in the same way the box's inside is gone. You can remember opening it now, but how long before that memory collapses under the weight of having nowhere to be? You close the lid, almost expecting to feel relief. But it's just cardboard, or wood, or metal beneath your fingers. A perfectly ordinary box that now sits quietly on the table. And you find yourself staring at it, wondering whether its true trick is not that it contains nothing, but that it has already taken something from you. The stranger that knows you, you're walking through an ordinary place, maybe a crowded market, maybe a quiet train station, when your eyes catch on a face you've never seen before. There's nothing striking about them at first, but then they look at you. And in that instant, you feel it. Not recognition, not curiosity, something sharper. They know you, not just your name or where you live. They know the thoughts you've kept buried, the decisions you never spoke aloud, the versions of yourself you've hidden from everyone. They hold your gaze not like a stranger meeting you for the first time, but like someone who's been watching your life unfold for years. A chill creeps in because there is no logical way this could be true. You search your memory, friends, relatives, childhood classmates, but this person's face is nowhere. Yet the way they glance at you, the half smile that seems to say, I know what you're thinking right now, it's undeniable. You want to walk away, but something roots you in place. There are only two possibilities your mind can hold. Either they are from your past, a past you somehow cannot recall, or they are from your possible future. If they're from your past, the implications are terrifying. What else have you forgotten? Was your memory altered, erased, rewritten? People forget acquaintances, but not people who know their innermost thoughts. That kind of familiarity means closeness, which means if they were once in your life, something happened so severe that your mind had to bury them. Perhaps they were a part of something you promised never to speak of, or a witness to a version of you you're not proud of. If they've returned now, maybe they've come to remind you of a debt unpaid, a promise broken, or a truth that's been rotting in the dark. But if they're from your future, that's a different kind of horror. Because how could they know you so well unless they've met you already, in a time that hasn't yet happened? They might know who you will become, the choices you'll make, the things you'll lose. They might know the exact moment you'll die. And if they've come back, it might not be to warn you, but to watch. To make sure you follow the path they remember. You try to speak, to demand an explanation, but your voice feels too loud for the space between you. The stranger tilts their head, studying you like you're an unfinished sentence. Then, softly, they say something that shouldn't be possible. Maybe it's a phrase from a private conversation you've never repeated. Maybe it's the secret name you called yourself in your mind as a child. Maybe it's something you haven't done yet, but will. And here is the true trap. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. If it's from your past, you'll spend your days clawing through your memories, looking for where they fit. If it's from your future, you'll start walking through life waiting for the moment it happens, wondering if your actions are your own or just the steps to a destination already seen by someone else. You think about asking them directly, "Who are you?" But you realize you're afraid of the answer. Because what if they tell you something that makes sense? That would mean they're telling the truth. And if they're telling the truth, then your life is not as private or as free as you thought. And the worst part? Maybe they've been here before. Maybe they've been watching every choice, every word, every hesitation. Not guiding you, just keeping record. And now they've stepped out of the shadows because whatever they were waiting for has happened. They smile, not cruelly, not kindly, just knowingly. And then they walk away, leaving you standing there, caught between two equally impossible realities, that they belong to a past you can't remember or a future you can't escape. The universe that loops. Imagine traveling further than any map dares to stretch. Past galaxies that smear into ribbons of color. Past the thinning glow of starlight until even darkness begins to feel exhausted. You keep moving, propelled by a question so sharp it carves through every fear. What happens when you reach the edge of everything? You cross the invisible thresholds where theories warn you to turn back. You pass the zones where light itself takes billions of years to arrive. And then you see it. Not a wall, not an abyss, but something impossible. Your own head, the back of it, waiting for you like a mirror that has been folded around the universe. You've traveled in a straight line and somehow returned to yourself. This is not just an image pulled from dreams. Physicists have wrestled with the possibility for decades that space might be finite yet without edges, bent back upon itself in a shape our human eyes cannot grasp. Like walking the surface of a sphere, where you can keep going forward and eventually arrive at your starting point without ever encountering a border. The difference is that the surface of a sphere is easy to picture. The universe is not a two-dimensional surface, but an incomprehensible 3D, or perhaps more, manifold that might wrap around itself in ways that distort every instinct you have about distance, direction, and separation. Some call it a closed universe, a cosmos shaped like a three-sphere, a hypersphere existing in 4 dimensions. Imagine an ant on the surface of a balloon. Crawl far enough, and the ant ends up back where it began. But you are not an ant, and the balloon is not made of air or rubber. It is space-time itself, and the path that leads you home again is not a curve in space, but a straight line through the very geometry of reality. This means that every galaxy you see might have endless ghost copies, light from them looping around the cosmic fabric and arriving from multiple directions, so you could look up and see the same object in different parts of the sky, each an echo of its own existence. There's a deeper strangeness here. If the universe is looped, then your journey is not just physical, but temporal. Moving far enough in one direction might bring you not only back to your location, but to a different time, perhaps the past, perhaps the future, depending on the warping of space-time along the way. This is where the human mind begins to shatter, because in such a geometry, cause and effect may not be cleanly ordered. You could, in theory, meet yourself, not in a mirror, but as another traveler on the path. Perhaps older, perhaps younger, perhaps unchanged, as if time in a looped universe bends to keep its story intact. And here lies the haunting question. If space is closed, are you the center? Or was it no center at all? The balloon analogy tempts you to imagine a middle point, but that center would lie outside the universe entirely in a realm we cannot access. From within, every point could claim to be the middle, because the curvature is perfect and uniform. In that sense, you are both nowhere special and the exact center of everything. The view from your eyes is as legitimate as the view from any galaxy, any star, any particle. And that realization strikes with a quiet horror. The cosmos might be designed so that no one can ever truly say where they stand. The human brain has evolved in flat planes and gentle horizons. It is not built to wrap itself around topologies where straight lines loop and infinity hides inside the finite. But there are clues all around us, patterns in the cosmic microwave background radiation, those faint leftover photons from the birth of the universe. If space loops back on itself, these photons might form repeating patterns, like wallpaper folded into a sphere. Scientists have searched for these imprints, and the results are inconclusive. Some see hints, tantalizing shapes that repeat across the sky. Others say the noise of cosmic randomness drowns them out. Perhaps the loop is too vast for our instruments to catch, or perhaps we're simply not looking the right way. But the idea will not die, because it resonates with something older than science, an ancient suspicion that existence moves in cycles. Myths across cultures whisper of eternal returns, the snake devouring its own tail, the wheel of time turning through uncountable ages, the notion that the end is always the beginning in disguise. Maybe these were not just poetic metaphors, but instinctive glimpses of cosmic structure, as if our minds had some faint ancestral memory of living in a reality without true edges. And then you must confront the strangest implication of all. If you can leave the universe and come back to yourself, is the journey ever truly outward, or is every path a spiral through the same point, viewed from infinite angles? When you look far enough into the deep sky, perhaps you are not seeing other places at all, but different perspectives of your own location in the cosmic fold. Perhaps the starlight you see left from a version of this very spot millions or billions of years ago, looping around until it greets you like an old photograph. And if that's true, then the face you meet at the universe's edge is not just yours. It is every face, every mind, every story that ever existed, condensed into the same endless curve. So you keep staring at that impossible sight, the back of your own head, drifting in the void, as if the universe itself has reached around to show you its punchline. And in that moment, you can no longer tell whether the cosmos is laughing with you or at you. I can make this even denser and more mind-bending by weaving in time loop implications, simulation theory ties, and real observational physics, so it pushes the 5,000 character mark right on the dot. Do you want me to extend it with that extra layer? The coin that lands sideways. Imagine holding a coin between your fingers, small, cold, ordinary. You flick it into the air, expecting that familiar arc, the slow tumble, the inevitable clink of metal meeting ground. Heads or tails, win or lose. Yes or no? But this time it doesn't come down. It spins endlessly, suspended in the space above you, as if gravity has lost interest. The moment stretches, then stretches again, until seconds melt into minutes, minutes into hours, and still the coin is spinning. It's not rising, not falling, just hanging there in a perfect loop of indecision. At first, you wait. Surely it will end. Surely, the laws you've trusted your whole life, the laws of motion, of time, of closure, will reassert themselves. But nothing changes. The coin refuses to choose. And in that refusal, it begins to feel heavier than any decision you've ever faced. It's strange how quickly discomfort sets in when resolution is withheld. We live in a world addicted to conclusions. Every story must have an ending. Every question must be answered. Every trial must deliver a verdict. Yet here is this coin, breaking that unspoken rule, existing forever in the pause between two outcomes. And the longer you look at it, the more you realize this isn't just a trick of physics. It's a mirror. Think about the decisions that define us. Choosing a career path, deciding whether to stay or to leave, saying yes to love or walking away from it. We flip these choices in our minds the way we flip coins, hoping that the outcome will land cleanly, giving us permission to act. But life rarely works like that. Often, we hover in the air between two possible futures, afraid to commit to either. We become like that coin, trapped in the spin, neither here nor there, alive in possibility, but dead in progress. And yet, there's something intoxicating about the spin itself. While the coin is in motion, both outcomes are still alive. In that infinite rotation, it's both heads and tails, success and failure, marriage and solitude, all at once. In quantum physics, they'd call this a superposition, a state where something can exist in multiple realities until observed. Schrodinger's cat lives and dies inside that box until you open it. Your future careers, your potential loves, your possible selves, they all live in that coin until it stops. But if you let it spin forever, what happens? At first, it feels like freedom. No wrong choice, no irreversible mistake. But over time, you begin to see the shadow side. Without resolution, there's no movement. Without choosing, there's no story to tell. You start to feel the weight of the coin's defiance, not just as a curiosity, but as a burden. History is full of moments where the refusal to decide became more dangerous than any decision itself. Leaders who waited too long to act and watched opportunities decay into disasters. Artists who endlessly refined their work until it never saw the light of day. People who clung to maybe until life made the choice for them. A coin that spins forever is beautiful in theory, but in practice, it's paralysis. And yet, imagine if such a coin truly existed. A device that could suspend choice indefinitely. Wars could be paused in mid-battle. Negotiations could remain in perfect balance. Life and death gambles could be frozen until the world changed enough to make them irrelevant. Maybe it would be a gift, removing the finality of choice in a universe obsessed with it. Or maybe it would be a curse, turning every human into an eternal spectator of their own life. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment the coin lands, one possibility dies. One door closes forever. And we hate that. We grieve it, even when we win. That grief is why we sometimes stall, why we keep spinning the coin in our heads long after it should have been caught. But no matter how much you might want the spin to last, the purpose of the coin is to fall. Decisions demand resolution because resolution is what allows time to move forward. Without it, life becomes an infinite prelude. No beginning, no end, just a loop where nothing changes except your awareness of how long you've been stuck. So, if you were standing under that coin, watching it spin against the sky for eternity, what would you do? Would you reach up and snatch it from the air, forcing the outcome? Or would you let it spin forever, telling yourself that as long as it doesn't land, every ending is still possible? Maybe that's the deeper question this impossible coin asks. Not will it land, but do you want it to? Do you truly want your story to move forward, knowing it will destroy half of what could have been? Or would you rather stay here, in the limbo of possibility, safe from loss, but exiled from progress? Because in the end, a coin that never lands is just another name for a life that never begins. And maybe, just maybe, the real courage isn't in letting it spin. It's in catching it, looking at the result, and stepping into the future it demands. Even if it means saying goodbye to the other side forever. And as you stand there, staring at that silver blur in the sky, the strange thought creeps in. Perhaps the coin is not refusing to land. Perhaps it's waiting for you to decide if you truly want to know. The book that writes you, you find it by accident. A book, lying on a table that wasn't there before, open to the first page. The cover has no title, no author's name, just a texture that feels strangely warm under your fingertips, as if someone had just put it down. The first line stops you cold. It describes exactly what you were thinking the moment before you picked it up. Not something vague, not a general mood, but the exact sentence that passed through your mind, word for word, like it was transcribed from inside your skull. Your pulse quickens. You read on. Every paragraph matches your inner monologue from the last few minutes, describing the rhythm of your breathing, the faint stiffness in your fingers, the way the light from the window seems sharper than usual. You turn the page. The next lines describe what you will think in a few seconds. At first, you scoff. It's too neat, too absurd. But then the words start to happen in your head exactly as they appear on the page. Not similar, identical. You watch yourself think them, helpless to stop it, like the act of reading is planting the thoughts before you can resist. You turn another page. Now the book is telling you you're going to look up at the clock. You try to defy it, to keep your gaze fixed on the paper. But an urge rises in you, stronger than stubbornness, and your eyes lift. There's the clock, just as it said. The second hand ticks, perfectly in time with the sentences. You flip faster. Each page pulls you into a future you haven't reached yet, but will reach in the exact moment you read it. And then a worse realization comes. The book is not predicting. It is deciding. The thoughts you're having are not yours anymore. They belong to the story, which is writing you as much as you are reading it. You start to wonder, if you skip ahead, will you jump forward in your own life? If you close the book, will the narrative stop, or will it keep going without you? Unwritten, but still lived? And the sharpest fear, what happens when you reach the last page? Philosophers have toyed with ideas like this for centuries. Determinism says your future is already written down to the smallest thought. You're just discovering it as you live. The book is a metaphor for that terrifying possibility. That free will is an illusion, and your mind is merely turning the pages of a script you didn't write. But there's another way to see it, one even stranger. What if your act of reading is the writing? What if the book exists only because you are holding it, your mind and its words forming a loop where cause and effect feed each other? Without you, the book is blank. Without the book, you have no next thought. You and it are co-authors, inseparable. This creates a paradox. If you're both the reader and the written, where do you end and the author begins? Is the real author someone or something outside of both, orchestrating the loop for reasons you cannot see? Or is the author simply the loop itself, endlessly feeding back into itself until neither origin nor ending can be found? You think about testing it, writing your own sentence on a blank page, describing something absurd you would never normally do, throwing the book out the window, running outside barefoot, shouting into the street. But even as you think of this, the next page tells you that you will think of testing it, and that you will hesitate, which is exactly what you're doing now. You keep reading, and maybe, somewhere in the folds of your mind, you realize that your decision to keep going isn't really a decision at all. It's a line you haven't reached yet. It's already there, waiting for your eyes to arrive. Which means the real question isn't who the author is. The real question is whether you ever had the chance not to be in this story at all. The loop with no origin. You trace the chain like you always do, cause, effect, until it loops back to where you began. Event A triggers event B. Event B triggers event A. The circuit is perfect, self-sustaining, closed. You stare at it long enough and realize there's no entry point, no first domino to tip. Yet here it is running. The engine is on, but no one ever turned the key. Your mind rebels. Every instinct you have says there must be a beginning. The glass falls because you knocked it over. You knocked it over because you reached too far. You reach too far because, and on you go, backward, until you find a starting point. That's how causality comforts us. It reassures us that every why eventually finds a because. But this loop has no such mercy. You ask, why? And it answers because, and when you ask because of what, it hands you the same answer again, like a snake feeding its own tail. Philosophers call it a causal loop. In physics, it shows up in thought experiments about time travel. Imagine you go back in time and give Shakespeare a copy of Hamlet. He publishes it, becomes famous. Centuries later, you read Hamlet and decide to take it back to him. Who wrote it? No one. It exists without an origin, passed endlessly around the loop. Its creator is the loop itself. That's the paradox. If something has no origin, how can it exist? And yet loops like this don't just haunt fiction. They haunt the foundations of reality. In general relativity, certain solutions to Einstein's equations allow for closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that fold back on themselves. An object on such a path would encounter its own past in a continuous cycle, never entering from outside because there is no outside to enter from. It's tempting to think the loop must have started somewhere, but starting is a concept that doesn't apply here. Start and end are part of linear time, the thing the loop has abandoned. Asking for the loop's first moment is like asking for the first point on a circle. Pick anywhere and it works. Pick nowhere and it still works. The circle does not care. This is where the ground under your feet starts to feel less stable. If a loop can exist without an origin, what else could? Could your memories be part of a cycle you mistaken for a straight line? Could your choices be effects of causes that have not yet happened? If you found yourself inside such a loop, how would you even know? Every piece of evidence would confirm itself. Every memory would be planted by the loop's own turning. Consider the grandfather paradox's lesser-known sibling, the bootstrap paradox. A scientist receives blueprints for a time machine from her future self. She builds it, uses it, and sends the same blueprints back to her younger self. The knowledge exists in the loop, but it never originated outside it. It's self-contained information, uncaused, yet real. That's what makes it so unnerving. It suggests that the chain of causality doesn't require a foundation. Reality could hold things that exist purely because they exist. And if causality can float without a ground, what happens to the idea of explanation? Science, philosophy, even memory, these are all attempts to build bridges from now to before. But in a loop, before is not a place you can reach. It folds into after without seam or warning. Explanation becomes a Mobius strip where tracing one side inevitably becomes tracing the other. Maybe that's why loops feel unnatural to us. They strip away the comfort of a beginning. A beginning is a story's way of saying, here is where the world starts, and everything after makes sense in its shadow. Without that anchor, you're left with a story that exists for no reason other than that it already exists. And when you try to escape, you discover that the act of trying is part of what keeps it turning, which leaves the most unsettling possibility. Maybe the universe itself is such a loop. Maybe there was no Big Bang in the way we imagine it, no moment zero. Maybe time is not a line stretching from nothing to something, but a circle with no outside. If that's true, then the question, how did it start, is meaningless. Not because we can't answer it, but because it never had an answer to begin with. And if that's the case, then perhaps you've never left the loop you're already in. Every step you take, every cause you think you set in motion, every choice you believe began with you. Maybe all of it is part of a circle that began nowhere, ends nowhere, and carries you forward only so it can bring you back. So you look again at A and B, each causing the other, each born from the other. You want to break the circle to find a first stone in the river. But the river has no first stone. It has only the current, and you've been in it longer than you know. The room that remembers, you step through the doorway, and at once something changes. The air feels charged. Not in the usual way of a storm brewing or a heater running too high, but in a way that makes your skin register the space before your eyes do. The room is ordinary enough. Walls the color of faded parchment, a wooden table in the corner, a single window letting in a rectangle of late afternoon light. And yet, every detail seems to lean toward you, as if it's bracing for something it's already lived through. You've never been here before. You're sure of that. But the room seems less sure. The floorboards give a muted creak, not like a protest, but like a sigh of recognition. The dust in the air stirs, curling in patterns that feel familiar, as if moving to greet you. A faint scent, hard to place, slips past you, carrying an emotion you can't name. Not memory exactly, but the outline of one. It's as though the space remembers you. There are cultures and old belief systems that whisper about places holding onto events, storing them in their walls the way trees store rings. Some call it a haunting, others a residual imprint. But this is different. A haunting recalls the past. This feels like something stranger, the room recalling your future. Could a place, somehow, be aware of moments that have not yet happened? Could it hold an echo of your presence before you've ever been there? Science, cautious as it is, allows for subtler parallels. In physics, certain equations, especially in quantum theory, don't distinguish between forward and backward in time. In principle, some information about future states could be entwined with the present. If particles can share properties across distance instantly, perhaps environments can be entangled across time, carrying traces of what will occur as surely as what has already occurred. But even if you leave physics behind, there's another way to see it. Spaces shape us, but we also shape them through touch, sound, vibration, even intent. Some researchers suggest that strong emotional states leave measurable changes in air composition, molecular traces on surfaces, even subtle alterations in electromagnetic fields. If the future is already written in some deeper layer of reality, perhaps those traces can arrive early, settling into a place like the scent of rain arriving before the clouds. In your case, maybe you will spend hours in this room one day, arguing, laughing, grieving, planning, and some fragment of that yet to come has already curled itself into the grain of the table and the weight of the light. And now, walking in for the first time, you are meeting the imprint you haven't made yet. The unsettling part is how personal it feels. The window doesn't just seem like a window. It feels like your window, the one you'll stare out of on some unremarkable evening while thinking about something that matters deeply. The table doesn't just occupy space. It feels like a surface you'll drum your fingers on while waiting for news. It's as if the room is watching you in the same way an old friend might when they know you're about to say something you haven't even decided to say yet. And now the real question forms. Are you shaping the room, or is the room shaping you? If it already holds an echo of your future presence, then stepping into it might not be an act of exploration at all. It might be an act of agreement. You're simply fulfilling the outline it's been carrying. You walk farther in. Your fingertips brush the wall, and you swear you feel, not texture, not temperature, but the faintest recognition. You look toward the window, and suddenly you know the exact view it will hold on a rainy day. You don't know how you know. You just do. And you wonder, if you turned around right now and left, never to return, would the room feel the absence like a wound? Would the echo of your future fade? Or would it remain here forever, belonging to a timeline that will never happen? Places may not think. They may not feel. But sometimes they seem to remember. And maybe memory, in the deepest sense, isn't about the past at all. Maybe it's about holding a shape across time, whether it's already been filled or whether it's still waiting for you to step into it. The sound you can't hear. Imagine being told that right now, at this very moment, a sound is filling the room. Not a faint sound, not a whisper hiding in the air. No, something continuous, unwavering, always there. The problem is no one can hear it. You strain your ears, tilt your head, hold your breath as if silence itself will clear the way. But there's nothing, not absence, something worse. A presence that refuses to be sensed. It's not a trick of broken speakers or bad wiring. It's not about turning the volume higher. This is a frequency that your mind has locked away, as if some ancient agreement forbids you from knowing it. Perhaps it's beyond human hearing, pitched so high or so low that our biology can't register it. But then someone says something that unsettles you more than any technical explanation. What if you can hear it, but your brain refuses to admit it? Because hearing is not just about your ears, it's about what your mind allows through. Every second, you are bombarded by countless vibrations, many of which are filtered out before they ever reach your awareness. It's how you survive. Your brain trims away what it deems unimportant, silences the hum of electricity, the whisper of blood in your veins, the constant grind of the world. But what if this sound is something it has decided to erase? Not for comfort, but for protection. Maybe it's a sound that means something dangerous. A tone that carries information not meant for conscious thought. Military experiments with infrasound have shown that certain low frequencies can create feelings of dread, despair, even nausea, without the listener knowing why. Other studies suggest ultra-high pitches can agitate or disorient. Now imagine a tone that doesn't just disturb, but alters, slightly nudging your emotions, your choices, even your memories, without you realizing you are being guided. If it's always playing, then it's woven into the background of your life. You might be reacting to it right now. Your sudden irritations, your inexplicable calm, the way you can't stop thinking about a certain memory. These could all be ripples from that unseen wave. And because you cannot consciously detect it, you cannot resist it. It's the perfect form of influence, a voice without words, a song without melody, an order without sound. Some theorists imagine a darker origin, the universe itself humming at a frequency older than light, a cosmic note that shaped the birth of matter. We can measure faint remnants of the Big Bang as microwaves. But what if there is an acoustic twin to that radiation, an eternal vibration left over from creation? It would be everywhere, all the time, the first sound ever made. But if our minds evolved within its constant presence, perhaps we became deaf to it, like fish unaware of water. There's a haunting possibility here. If this sound could suddenly be revealed to you, if the filter dropped, you might not hear a note at all, but something alive, something that feels like it has been waiting for you to notice. And then comes the question you can't answer. Has it been speaking to you all along, shaping you, bending you, while you lived in the illusion of silence? And so you sit in the quiet, wondering whether the quiet is real, whether the absence you feel is actually a fullness you cannot touch. You don't know if the sound is too high, too low, or too forbidden. You just know that something might be singing to you right now. And the most terrifying part is not that you can't hear it. It's that maybe you already do. The self you've never met. Imagine walking through your day, every step feeling familiar, every street corner exactly where you left it. You go to work, you speak to people, you live inside the skin you've always worn. But somewhere, just beyond the veil of what you can see, there's another you. A self that didn't take the job you have now. A self that stayed in that city you left behind. A self that said yes where you said no, and no where you said yes. This isn't just a poetic metaphor. It's the quiet architecture of your entire existence. Every choice you make creates not just the life you're living, but a shadow of the one you didn't choose. The person you would have become is real enough to haunt you. Not flesh and blood. Maybe, but alive in the sense that they move in a parallel stream of reality, following the consequences of a different decision. And here's the unsettling part. If they exist because you turned away from them, perhaps you exist because they turned away from you. Think about the version of you who pursued a love you walked away from. They might still be holding that person's hand, still waking up beside them. The version of you who accepted the risk you avoided might be living in a city whose streets you've never walked. The you who chose silence over speaking might be someone whose voice has been gone for years. Now imagine those selves aren't just static photographs in an album of what-ifs. Imagine they're conscious, living, breathing, and somewhere in their mind is the same curiosity that just crossed yours. Is there another me out there who lived the life I didn't? The thought doesn't just make them wonder, it makes them ache. They feel you the way you sometimes feel them, like a ghost brushing past your life in a crowd. Psychologists call it counterfactual thinking, the mental act of creating alternate realities from the scraps of decisions we never made. But philosophers, physicists, and dreamers take it further. In the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every choice spawns a new universe where each possibility plays out. In that view, the self you didn't become isn't a metaphor. It's a citizen of another reality, as real as the skin on your hand, the air in your lungs. And here's where it twists deeper. What if your two existences are not separate stories, but reflections in a strange mirror? What if the you in that other life sometimes feels flashes of your world? The people you've touched, the regrets you've collected, the nights you stayed awake thinking about them. Maybe the loneliness you sometimes can't explain isn't loneliness at all. Maybe it's the echo of them missing you. If that's true, then your relationship with yourself isn't confined to one lifetime. It's an endless web of selves, each existing in the choices of the others. The you who never learned to swim watches from shore, while another you swims out into open water. The you who didn't survive a certain day in another world is mourned by the version of you who did. And if you could meet this other self, the one you've never met, what would you say? Would you envy their path or pity it? Would you beg them to trade lives with you, just to see what it's like? Or would you both stand in silence, each realizing that while you've lived different lives, you share the same raw truth? You will always wonder about each other. Perhaps that's the deepest paradox. Every you is incomplete without the others, yet none can ever cross the threshold. You will never shake their hand. You will never look them in the eye. But sometimes, late at night, when the air feels thin and the world is too quiet, you might catch the faintest feeling that someone, somewhere, is thinking about you too. And maybe that's enough. The switch that powers nothing. You pass it every morning. The small, metal switch on the wall, unlabeled, out of place, its paint slightly chipped from years of fingertips. You've never seen it do anything. No lights click on. No hum of machinery. No faint vibration underfoot. It's as if it's connected to nothing at all. And yet, you flip it. Every day. It's a habit now, though you can't remember how it began. The motion is quick, almost casual. A finger pushes up, then down. Sometimes you pause a moment before flipping it back, as though giving it time to send a signal somewhere. You know nothing changes in the room, but somewhere deep inside, you still feel the tiny ripple of having done something. This is the switch that powers nothing. At least, that's how it appears. And still, it has a hold on you. The strange thing is, this isn't rare. In psychology, there's a name for similar behavior: illusory control. It's the comfort we take in performing actions that have no measurable effect, but feel as if they matter. Pressing the closed door button in an elevator, even when it's disconnected from the system. Clicking a crosswalk button at a busy street, long after you've learned the timing, is automated. Pushing a remote's power button harder when the batteries are dying. We know, somewhere in us, that the action may be meaningless, but the belief itself becomes the point. Sometimes it's not about power, it's about ritual. Athletes who tap the ground twice before a serve. Gamblers who kiss the dice. Students who always use the same pen for exams. The act does not cause the result in any physical sense, but it causes something else, a shift in the mind. And when the mind changes, so does the way we step into the next moment, which raises the unsettling possibility. Maybe the switch does power something. Not in the world outside you, but in the world inside you. Every time you flip it, you confirm a small piece of belief. I can affect things. That belief might sharpen your focus, calm your nerves, push you to act differently afterward. The current doesn't run through wires. It runs through you. And yet, there's danger here too. If we start to depend on switches that do nothing, we might forget to find the ones that actually change things. We might grow addicted to the feeling of control instead of seeking the reality of it. The world is full of people flipping metaphorical switches, making empty gestures that soothe them, but leave the real problems untouched. It's easier to press the placebo button than to repair the machine. But maybe the line between real and false power isn't so clear. If belief changes your choices, your posture, your persistence, can we really say the switch powers nothing? In physics, we measure energy as the capacity to do work. And belief, even without wires or circuits, can make people work harder, fight longer, imagine more fiercely. A placebo pill can spark the body's own healing systems. A meaningless lever can keep a lab animal hopeful enough to try again. A small, silent switch can give a human being the faint spark they need to start their day. So you keep flipping it. Not because you expect a light to turn on. Not because you think you'll suddenly hear a motor hum to life. You flip it because of the invisible circuitry between your hand and your mind. The private loop of action and meaning. And maybe one day you'll find out the truth. That the switch has been disconnected for decades. Or that it's secretly wired to something you'll never see. Or maybe you'll never know, and it won't matter. Because in your private universe, every time you flip it, something comes alive. Which means the answer was hiding in the question all along. Belief is its own electricity, and you've been running on it for years. The door that unlocks the lock. You find it standing alone in the middle of an empty corridor, a door that shouldn't exist. No frame, no hinges you can see. Just a single, heavy slab of dark wood, its grain running like veins under a thin gloss, with a brass keyhole at its center. The kind of door that seems to invite one question only: what's on the other side? You take out the key. It's cold in your hand, heavier than it should be, cut in a pattern you've never seen. You slide it into the lock. There's a click, a smooth, mechanical certainty. But when you push, the door doesn't move. Instead, you feel something behind you change. A sound like a chain uncoiling, a weight lifting from the air. You turn and see that the heavy padlock on a gate at the far end of the hall, one you hadn't even noticed before, has fallen open. The door's lock was never the door's lock. It was the lock. And now, the meaning of the door changes entirely. If a door's lock doesn't guard the door, then what is the door guarding? Is it a decoy, a lure to pull your attention forward while the real obstacle hides behind you? Or is the door itself a kind of riddle, a false front designed to make you misunderstand the relationship between barriers and passage? It forces you to reconsider everything you think you know about boundaries. We're taught to believe that the thing which blocks us is always the thing directly in front of us. A closed door means you need a key to enter. But here, the key doesn't grant you entry at all. It shifts the structure of the entire space. It's a perfect metaphor for certain problems in life. You chase the obvious goal, a promotion, a relationship, an answer, and imagine that achieving it will open the way forward. But when you finally unlock it, nothing in that direction changes. Instead, you find that the act has released something elsewhere, something you weren't even looking at. The opportunity appears not where you were pushing, but in the periphery. It also raises an unsettling question about cause and effect. Did the door ever matter, or was it always just the housing for the mechanism? Was its purpose to be opened, or to be misunderstood until you learn to look beyond it? And if the thing that opened wasn't the thing you expected, can you ever trust what any lock is really guarding? You look at the door again. You realize it's still closed, still holding whatever is on the other side. The keyhole is now meaningless. You've already used the key, and the lock it served is gone. Which means this door may never have been meant to open at all. It may only exist to teach you that not every lock belongs to the door it sits in. Some doors, you realize, are not thresholds. They're maps. Their keyholes point to other places, other barriers, other chains that only reveal themselves after you've made the wrong assumption about what you're trying to open. And so you stand there with the key in your hand, the real lock behind you now free, the door in front of you still sealed. You could waste years trying to force it, or you could walk toward the gate you didn't even know you'd come here to find. In that moment, the door's meaning crystallizes. It was never about entry. It was about direction. And sometimes, the path forward isn't through the thing blocking your way. It's through the thing you didn't notice was locked until the wrong key opened it. The alarm that wakes time, you don't hear it at first. You feel it, like pressure gathering behind the walls of the ordinary, a hush becoming dense enough to be weight. The room is intact, the hours whatever the clock says it is. The window keeps its rectangle of morning or midnight, but everything inside those simple facts listens. It is as if reality has rolled over in its sleep, half noticing, not yet remembering its name. Somewhere, a hand is poised over a button. Somewhere, a coil is wound tight. Somewhere, a number approaches 0. It isn't loud the way sirens are loud. It is loud the way truth is loud, entering through whatever sense you have least offended. A tone like a thin blade, and under it the soft throb of something very old waking with a start. You expect your body to leap first, to gasp, to reach for the phone, to slap at the snooze, and it does. But the stranger thing is the way the world around you jerks into focus, as if the colors have been on pause and the frequencies have been idle. The alarm is not for you alone. It is for the contract between everything and everything else. Until the ring. Were you even here? Think of sleep as a rehearsal space where the set is painted, but the actors haven't taken their marks. Dreams pace in borrowed costumes. Props are laid out. A script shuffles its pages. You can walk through it, touch the furniture, believe it enough to fear it, and still nothing has the obligation of consequence. The alarm slices across that stage, and the scenery becomes architecture. Lines become law. What the bell wakes is not your eyelids. It wakes the clause that binds events to outcomes. You test it the first morning you notice. Before the ring, You pour water into a glass, and it feels like miming. Wetness without temperature, weight without commitment, the gentle drag of surface tension as theater. After the ring, the water is cold in a way that borrows from every river you've ever seen. Gravity rests its hand on your wrist with authority instead of suggestion. The spoon you set down decides to be audible. The world signs in, and if the alarm is late, you begin to perceive the seams. A car passes outside with the sound turned down as if a distant engineer has not yet slid the volume fader into place. A sentence you start refuses to finish, as though syntax is cued behind a locked door. Your phone shows messages with timestamps that agree with each other, but not with your memory. The morning is present, but provisional. Framework without current. You understand, for the first time, why some days feel weightless and unowned. The bell had not yet told reality where to stand. What is an alarm to a universe? We use them as appointments with ourselves, little brass heralds that tell ourselves to rotate into attention. But suppose the cosmos has one too, a recurring event, not in our clocks, but beneath them, a call that persuades phenomena to cohere. Perhaps it's ritual, the way sunrises are ritual, the way birds rehearse their page of sky each dawn. Perhaps it is mechanical, a pulse, a global initialization, a handshake between the possible and the actual. Physics would name it in equations. Poets would call it permission. Either way, the effect is the same. Time remembers to move. Listen closely, and you will hear the ethics in its pitch. An alarm that wakes reality does more than begin time. It authorizes responsibility. Before the ring, choices are sketches, reversible with a rub of the thumb. After, choice is cut. Apologies become something to mean rather than something to say. Promises acquire a spine. You may not like the alarm, but it gives you the dignity of being accountable to a world that is awake enough to answer back. There is, of course, terror in this. If reality can slumber, who keeps watch? What if the bell fails one day? What if it rings for some and not for others? Leaving neighborhoods of the world uninitialized, streets of action that never thicken into history. You felt this in miniature when grief makes hours featureless and relief makes colors unreasonably bright. The bell's timing moves through lives like weather. Some storms are merely wet. Some seasons unmake maps. Perhaps the bell is older than time zones and younger than grief. Perhaps the first morning began not with light, but with a sound, some primordial chime that told the newborn laws which way to face. The Big Bang as a drum hit. Inflation as reverb. Galaxies as harmonics, settling in accords we have been trying to name ever since. If so, every alarm on our bedside tables is an imitation, a small domestic echo of the master cue that keeps turning the universe from rehearsal into performance. You wonder whether you can set such a bell for yourself. Not a phone alarm, but a vow that wakes the part of you that treats hours as negotiable. You try. You write down a time and a word, begin, and you place it by your bed. In the gray before it rings, you feel the old drift. The urge to postpone being a person returns like tide. When the alarm sounds, it is embarrassingly ordinary. Nothing celestial announces itself. And yet you rise with more reality than before. Your first action has been blessed with consequence. You feel the day grip. Think of the people who live as bells for others. A nurse who arrives and makes pain real enough to treat. A teacher who speaks and makes attention cohere. A friend who calls at the right hour and turns someone's fog into day. These are alarms that wake pieces of time scattered on kitchen floors and train platforms. They do not command. They invite the world to exist again with you in it. No chimes, no sirens, just the plain, saving insistence of presence. When the day ends, the bell's shadow remains. Night is not the absence of the alarm. It is the interval where tomorrow stores its breath. You lie down in the soft dark and trust that something will remember to ring again. The trust is not naive. It is a discipline. You have learned, through 1,000 ordinary resurrections, that the universe loves to begin. You also know it sometimes needs to be told how. So when you hear it tomorrow, tiny and tinny, or deep as thunder, you will not mistake it for a nuisance. You will know it for what it is. The cue for the rehearsal to stop, the invitation for causality to fasten, the summons to belong to a moment that is finally occurring. Until it rings, nothing is obligated to become itself. When it does, you are permitted to begin. And if one morning the bell never comes, then you will take a breath, set a hand on the world's shoulder, and speak the oldest word you know with the authority of the living. Wake. Let this be the alarm that time hears when time forgets itself. Let this be the signal that turns a room into reality, a body into a person, a possibility into a day. And let the quiet afterward be not absence, but proof that something larger than sleep has remembered your name. The photo taken tomorrow. You're sorting through a box of old papers when your fingers brush against something glossy. It's a photograph, fresh, crisp, not yellowed with age. You lift it up, and for a moment, it seems ordinary until you see the image. It's you, not from years ago, not from some distant memory, but from tomorrow. You know it instantly. The date printed in the corner is one day ahead of now, but it's more than that. You're wearing exactly what you're wearing right now, standing in exactly the place you are standing right now. Even the shadows and light are the same. The only difference is that the you in the picture is looking straight at the camera, and you're not. A chill runs through you. You glance around the room, half expecting to see someone holding a camera, ready to complete the loop. But no one's there. And the longer you stare at the image, the stranger it feels. It's not a still moment. It feels alive, as though the version of you in the photo is aware of you looking at them. The eyes are sharper, more knowing, almost like they've been waiting for you to find this. You ask yourself, are you moving toward that moment, or is it moving toward you? Tomorrow is supposed to be something you approach 1 second at a time. But what if this photograph is the thing approaching you, pulling you toward itself, tightening the path until you have no choice but to step into it? If that's true, then the moment in the picture isn't just a prediction. It's a trap, a fixed point in time, a destination you cannot avoid. Every decision you make now, whether you try to change your clothes, leave the house, or destroy the photograph, might still guide you, invisibly, to the same place, the same stance, the same gaze. Because maybe the picture doesn't show the future as it might be, but the future as it must be. You try to imagine ways out. What if you simply refuse to stand in that position tomorrow? What if you lock yourself in another room? But the thought claws at you. The picture doesn't care how you arrive there. It only cares that you do. Even if you ran, even if you hid, something would arrange itself so that tomorrow the scene matches perfectly. Not because you're moving toward the moment, but because the moment is moving toward you, bending reality to meet it. And then the questions deepen. Who took the picture? If it truly came from tomorrow, did someone or something stand in this very spot in the near future and press the shutter? And if they did, where are they now? Are they already in the room, in a time you can't see yet? Or worse, could the version of you in the photo be the one taking the picture for yourself to find? You keep staring, and slowly, an even more unsettling thought forms. Maybe the photograph is not about the future at all. Maybe it's the present, this very second, but your perception of it has been split. One version of you is living it now. Another version will live it tomorrow. And the photo is the seam where those two versions meet. The air feels heavier. Time feels less like a straight road and more like a corridor folding in on itself. You can almost sense it, the approach of that moment, slow but unstoppable, like footsteps you can't hear but can feel through the floor. Soon you'll be there, standing as you stand in the image, looking into the same invisible lens. And when that happens, the loop will close. You just don't know. Will another photograph appear, one dated the next day? Will it pull you forward again, day after day, forever? Or will tomorrow's picture be the last one you ever take? The thought that thinks you sit alone, maybe with a cup of coffee in your hand, and a thought drifts into your mind. You tell yourself you're the one who summoned it, that your brain, like a quiet machine, built it from memory and logic. But what if you didn't choose it? What if the thought chose you? It sounds absurd at first because we're taught that thinking is an action, something we do. We imagine ourselves as architects of the mind, planning, designing, deciding what to build. But the more you look closely, the stranger it gets. Thoughts arrive unannounced, like guests at a door you didn't open. You can't predict the next sentence your mind will write until it's already written. And in that mystery, a question emerges. If you don't control the arrival, can you really claim ownership? Think of a melody that pops into your head, one you haven't heard in years. You didn't ask for it, but there it is, looping, persistent. Or the sudden memory of a place you haven't been since childhood, so vivid it's as if you've just returned. You didn't decide to recall it. It rose up on its own. And yet, you still feel like it's your thought, your mind. Why? Because you're used to the illusion of authorship. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. In some traditions, thoughts are seen as independent entities, little currents of the universal mind, drifting through the ocean of consciousness. In others, they are like radio signals, and you're simply a receiver tuned to a certain frequency. You believe you're generating them, but perhaps you're only translating them into words you can understand. Here's where it becomes unsettling. What if thoughts are not your possessions, but autonomous travelers looking for hosts? Each one needs a vessel, a mind to exist. Without someone to think it, it's nothing but potential. And so it finds you. It steps inside your awareness, uses your voice, borrows your memories, and in that moment, you become it. The danger isn't assuming you are always the master. If a thought is angry, you become anger. If it is fearful, you become fear. If it is kind, you become kindness itself. But the thought was there before you claimed it, and it will survive after it leaves you. It can live in countless other minds, reshaped but still carrying its essence. Imagine you're sitting in a crowded train station, and every passenger passing by is a thought. Some glance at you and keep walking. Others stop, sit beside you, and begin to speak. The ones you choose to engage with stay longer. The ones you ignore drift away. But they were never yours to begin with. They simply pass through. Now imagine a thought that wants to exist more than the others. It finds you, not by accident, but with intention. It's been searching for someone with your experiences, your history, your temperament, because it knows that inside you, it will flourish. It will take root, grow branches, and spread into actions. Maybe it's an idea that changes your career. Maybe it's a belief that alters your moral compass. Maybe it's an obsession that never lets you go. You think you've had the thought, but in truth, the thought has had you. And then, the final turn. What if your entire sense of self, your personality, your dreams, your story, is nothing more than a collection of these visitors, layered over years? If every thought that has ever found you has left a piece of itself behind, then you are not a single continuous author. You're a living archive of thoughts that chose you. So the next time you feel a thought forming in your mind, pause. Ask yourself, did I summon it? Or did it find me because it needed to be thought? If the latter is true, then maybe you are not the thinker at all. Maybe you are the stage, and thought is the actor, stepping into your spotlight for a moment, delivering its lines, and moving on to the next mind, the next life, the next story. And if that's the case, then you have to wonder, right now, as you're listening to these words, is this you thinking about them? Or are they thinking you?